Yoshida.
This is Fern Halls.
And you are listening to Aetheryte Radio.
Aetheryte Radio.
Here we go.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Aetheryte Radio Gamerscape's Final Fantasy XIV podcast. I'm FusionX. Joining us today, we've got Zanidra.
Hi.
We've got Alduno.
Hi.
And we've got Rogue. I was like, is he going to say anything?
No. I knew someone else was going to say hello.
You got to do it for me too. So we got all
Hi.
three. Thank you.
Oh, wait, no, wait. I did it wrong. Hey.
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 Yeah.
Today we're going to continue our retrospective of Final Fantasy XIV. This time around, we are at Stormblood. So I'm sure we'll have some exciting things to talk about.
Sound more sure. Be very sure.
It's going to be so exciting.
Yes. No, I actually think Stormblood is a fascinating period of time in the game. And whatever you thought of the expansion.
It's the time where I actually liked Xenos.
I mean, yeah, but like there were a lot of things that they did in Stormblood that kind of set the precedent for like future content or story division and all sorts of things. So I'm excited to talk about Stormblood.
Yeah. Quick though, before we get into that, we do have a little bit of news. The Callback Campaign is here. It's underway until September 30th. So if you have friends that used to play the game but are not playing the game right now, you can tell them to come back and play the game.
Stop it.
Or threaten to find new friends.
Stop not playing the game.
Stop not playing a game.
Yeah. Also, the third Tales from the Dawn story is up. Next week will be the last one. So maybe we'll
Only
talk about
4.
those.
Yeah.
There's only 4.
It's quick.
They came out really fast, I felt
They did.
like.
Mhm.
Maybe they normally come out this fast? I don't know,
They-
but I
yeah,
thought
they
in the
don't.
past.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought there were like at least a month between releases last time, but I'm not complaining. I've liked
Mhm.
getting this set of stories.
My theory is there's a second set. Don't prove me wrong, SE.
Well, there has
Show
been
me.
before, right?
Yeah. Show,
Yeah, later
show us,
on.
like,
Yeah.
6-3, maybe we'll get the second part. That's what I'd love to see.
There you go.
Chat.
That's news.
Chat also mentions that the Rising is still going on.
Yeah,
So if you haven't
Rising's
done it
still
yet,
Yeah.
finish
For,
that up.
Like
Rise up.
as of day of
Mhm.
recording, like I think like 2 more days. So like if you have not gotten your Solus minion, log in.
Yep.
Put us in a tab, put us on your second monitor, whatever, and go do the thing.
I thought
Mhm.
it was interesting that they don't let you skip cutscenes this time.
Yeah.
Not that I wanted to on my 1st
Mhm.
playthrough, but
You
on my
did?
5th I did.
I
Yeah.
did.
No, the one where you have to answer questions for
Oh,
D-Man.
those ones. Okay.
Can't
Yeah,
skip
you
it.
can't.
That having been said, I watched my wife play through them and I read them there first, so I didn't feel like I needed to watch them a second time. I didn't just like skip all just
No, I get it.
preventing a
Well,
few
that's
The second
comments
or
from
third
happening.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I judged you. I'm not gonna lie. For like 1 second, I
Wow.
thought maybe we
Oh.
need to have a talk about how Fusion might not need to be on the podcast anymore if Fusion doesn't want to play any of the story in Final Fantasy. But you saved it. You saved it. So thank you for explaining.
Wow. Anyway. So yeah, last time we talked about Heaven's Word, we did our retrospective. Last week was our review of patch 6.2. So if you have not checked that out yet, it does have spoilers. So if you are behind, that is your
Mhm.
warning. So yeah, Stormblood, man. All right. So I think the first place we got to start, right, is the teaser, the FanFest
Yep.
teaser, right? Not as many like Dragoon arousal vibes from this one for me.
Mm. Okay.
But what we did see was disappointment. Ultimately, people thought we were getting Dancer because we
Yeah.
saw Lise in
Lise.
that gown, and the amount of
That's right.
people were like, "Dancer, oh my god!"
I
And
mean,
it's like,
ultimately,
no.
we weren't
Yeah.
wrong.
We
Well,
did
it
eventually
took
get
it took an
Dancer.
expansion.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's so funny. I had completely forgotten about that. And I guess they could have easily made Dancer something that would be from Alamigo with
Yeah.
its kind of themes and vibe.
Sure.
They could have gone that way.
Mhm.
But yeah, her outfit does look a lot like that. I had completely forgotten that people thought that's what we were going to be getting.
Mhm.
I, in fact, use it as a dancer glam now. Booyah.
Yep.
I mean, it's a good dancer glam.
Yeah, there was a lot of hype leading up to Stormblood. Stormblood was actually the very first expansion that I was in the game for expansion release. And it was so thrilling to be a part of stuff like the FanFest teasers that were coming out, to actually be looking forward to it and knowing that I'd be able to set foot in it alongside everybody for the first time, rather than like playing catch up and then, having everybody tell me about all the cool stuff that was ahead. So it was a really exciting time. And I think as well as we started to get more tidbits that we would even be going to, the East, so many people were very excited about that because, for a long time we hadn't really had any zones, and we didn't even know if they really wanted to or were going to do zones that were kind of, Japanese or East Asian influenced. So it was cool to see that. And then of course they kind of underscored that by actually giving us the classes that were more themed to Doma, Hingashi, those sorts of areas.
Yeah, I remember
Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
Remember that tease?
Sam Raimi, Spider,
and the Scarlet Witch.
Samurai. Yeah. I have that Scarlet Witch shirt.
Yep.
Yeah, that
What did you
Yoshida-san
guys-
wore.
What did you guys think it could have been other than Samurai? Because it was Spider-Man, right? It could have been Blue Mage. It could have been some kind of, I don't know.
That was my only
Spider
other
Mage
idea.
Spider Mage.
Yeah, I don't know if I thought anything really about it. Samurai just seemed such a solid bet.
It was so obscure, I think, that I'm like, maybe it's Samurai or just who knows.
Yeah. I was thinking Blue Mage or Samurai. Those are the only two that I could even reconcile in my brain. And then, of course, Scarlet Witch was like, well, come on.
Yeah, that one was pretty obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should have saved that shirt for this week, except never mind, because we wouldn't be a cult.
That's right.
It's true. Yeah. If you haven't noticed, if you're tuning in live right now, it's hard to see with the way that the cams are cropped and the way that our cameras are. We're all wearing the exact same shirt. So it started off, me and Aldi, got on cams. We're like, oh, hey, nice shirt. And then Rook joins and she's like, I'll be right back. And then I went AFK for a minute and I came back and Zen had her shirt on too. And it's like, cool.
I showed up in a different shirt and Rook was like, oh, by the way.
Yeah. I don't know if you got the memo
together.
today.
Yeah.
I think we did this like one other time before. It was like an FF8 shirt, I think.
Yep.
Oh,
like
yeah,
two
I
or
didn't
three
have
of
that
us
one.
that-
I was so sad.
That's okay.
Yeah, well,
You think I ignored that we dressed together in Stormblood when we go together? Come on.
thank
I'm
you.
not gonna
Thank you
ignore
for acknowledging it. I felt
Yeah.
pretty proud about it, and then I immediately
You
felt
should
a
be.
little bit weird about it because I suddenly imagined all of us like backstage in high school changing for like a school play version of Stormblood.
Oh, yeah.
See, I was thinking of the inn in Hingashi, with the bathhouse with the
Oh, yeah.
Also,
All-
yes.
all the weird shit in
I'm
there.
just my brain went to dress spheres from 10 too. It's like we dress together. Yeah.
That's good.
I just really love that bathhouse is basically just a place for like gay Rugen to hook up, which is my
Yeah.
favorite thing in the
Yeah.
whole
They're like
world. They are
what kind
thriving.
of environment can we have in the game where we can have stupid sexy Flanders reference bubble text? Let's do a little bathhouse.
It's good.
It's
It's
perfect.
good. That was a great thing that Stormblood did give us. But we started out a lot of our other sort of, I don't know, introductions to an expansion by pulling some reviews and our own as well. This time around, we had 2 reviews about Stormblood, clips from IGN. So IGN mentioned worse things happen in Stormblood, the latest expansion for the MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV, but cruel moments sculpt the overarching narrative into one of the finest stories of brutality, of war, and tyranny since The Witcher 3. It bravely ventures into places where brightly colored fantasy epics like this too often fear to tread, such as sad villages where the locals tremble at the thought of resisting oppressors who've abused them for more than 2 decades. I was actually surprised. Sorry, I have a siren going by. That's the the war field coming in here.
That's
to
from
help
the
us make
villages
ambiance.
that are
from the
resisting
villages.
oppressors.
Yeah.
I was surprised because it seemed as though, in retrospect, and we'll talk more about this, but it seemed as though Stormblood, for all that there are these like really shining areas and moments and zones and story beats, oftentimes I think it gets a lot of flack in the community for being one of the weakest expansions. But a lot of the reviews were fairly positive about some of the story beats that it brought to the table, and seemed pretty pretty invested in it. So, I mean,
Mhm.
Kotaku as well had a shorter one that just said, I haven't completed the final battle in Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood expansion's main storyline. The titular quest has been sitting in the top left corner of my screen for a week, and I've been doing everything I can to ignore it. I don't want it to end. Like, I don't know. I just thought this was interesting. Considering how I think we look back on it now a little bit.
Yeah, this is one of those things that reminds me kind of one of the bigger things about Stormblood when it came out. I mean, obviously, I think part of the reason that a lot of players' views have maybe deteriorated a little bit about Stormblood is because we got Shadowbringers after this. And
Yeah.
let's be honest.
It's like
Shadowbringers
gave
is like
us-
way up
yeah.
here.
it's like they gave us lemon meringue pie, which is amazing, but then they gave us like German chocolate cake. So we're like, okay, well that was good, but also this is good.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
one of the things I really remember about the first
I
few
actually like
weeks,
lemon meringue pie more.
I'm more of like
Me
a
too,
Boston
thank
Boston
you.
cream guy, but anyway.
Key lime.
Today on Aetheryte Radio, top 10 pies. Was the media in particular just really been like this? The Shinryu fight is impossible. It's too hard. Difficulty. That's all I remember from the media circuit for Stormblood was everybody just saying how difficult the final battle was.
Yeah. Which,
Yeah. Go ahead, you do.
I mean, it was, you had to pay attention, and it was so weird, and it was long, sure, but
I feel like
I
it
don't
set an unfortunate precedent for what we have now.
yeah, it's true.
But
Yeah.
that is 100% from my perspective, where I go into some content and I'm like, that could have been a little harder.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I felt that honestly, that Shinryu fight, I think at release, going through,
Mhm.
is one of the things that really stands out to me in Stormblood in a really positive way. It was so hard. I think it's one of the few fights because I didn't play through Heavensward before they tuned down Final Steps of Faith. But it was one of the few fights that I think I've gotten to that final fight, that final instance, and we wiped multiple times at release. And I was just going, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And it was one of the first fights that actually I remember in the game personally made me look at multiple cast bars in a single boss fight, because he does the different things like the different elements, but they cast from different wings, which then obviously gets iterated upon in the extreme fight. And to this day, I still love when that fight pops up, because to me, it felt like a final battle.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it felt like something that was an expansion in the making and was so epic and so intense. Now, I got grumpier about it when I was trying to farm for the mounts in extreme
Sure.
version.
Sure.
But to me, I loved that fight. And yeah, it definitely sticks out in my memory from Stormblood.
Yeah, you're right. That is probably one of my favorite fights now that you mention it.
Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah.
it's one
It
of those.
just makes me think back to when not everybody had a knockback nullifier.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
one of the first things they hit you with, and you're like, okay, well, everybody use your knockback. And I'm like, I'm a bar.
Yeah, I mean it really was, I think it's one of those things like it's the final boss fight. Like you don't want it to be like a rollover. Like it's like, oh, stab once, you got me. But like at the same time, I mean the coverage of the fight's difficulty, I think really did probably, Square saw that and said, oh, this is what people are hearing about the game, that it's too hard. And then the next expansion, we had trust dungeons, right?
Yeah.
We had
Yeah.
soloable content. I'm really curious, because on one hand, right? I mean, looking at the overall player base, okay, you take like a couple hundred media outlets versus like millions of players, right? It's
Yeah.
like vocal minority.
But I mean,
maybe
there are also
better.
going to be players who agree with the media
Sure.
outlets that it is
Sure.
too hard, that it is more difficult.
Yeah, and
I-
that was fair. That affected play. Like
Yeah.
I remember when I would be running mentor roulettes, or I'd run a roulette where it would pop up, people would queue into it and just leave. And we'd have to wait for other players
Yeah.
to fill because
People
nobody
used to do
wanted
that
to deal with it.
with Steps of Faith as well. They'd get in and be like, nope, and just they're gone.
Where you see people do this is where the casual and hardcore community interacts for the only times. 24 mans. No, but let's take off clothes so we don't have to go to that one, because it's going to be hard, because there's hardcore and there's casual and there's the mixing there, and that's where the pain points are. Everybody has to beat Shinryu. Everybody has to do it. Oh no. And that's where you get to it.
More and more people are willing to speak up and say, hey, this is how you do the mechanic. And more of those people are doing it nicely.
Yeah.
It's true.
Definitely.
It's really interesting in that the reason that Shinryu is hard has not changed. And it's only because everything else is so easy until you get to the end. Everything else is super easy until you get to Thordan, to Shinryu, to Hades. Remember that? I mean, we'll talk about that the next time, but that's exactly why. And you can't get around that unless you make it harder before that, which they will not do. Yeah. And I agree with them.
I mean, and it makes sense. Like, it's that progression of difficulty. Yeah. Like, it's just like you go through and then at the end it's a little harder than everything. Like, that's how it should be.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Last bosses in Final Fantasy are supposed to rock you the first time.
It is so fascinating to me, because when you think about how many of us, and now I think single player games are helped in modern day by difficulties that you can set, right? Yeah. And I'm guilty of this too. I know that there have been some games I personally have such limited time to dedicate to single player games now. I love them. They are still some of my favorite things. I love single player narratives, but I've even found myself going through a playthrough and I set it on the hardest difficulty and I go, I do not have time for this. Yeah. I am enjoying it, but it is going to take me like 3 times as long and I don't have time for this. However, it's still funny to me though, because I think within a single player format, minus those kinds of things, we tend to expect almost more of a troubleshooting process. Yeah. I don't know if this is because you are alone and within that you are puzzling through by yourself, whereas there's that kind of social pressure in an MMO. You might get frustrated because either other people are getting through the story faster than you, or you feel embarrassed because you're around other people who might watch you fail. I'm not sure if that's the deciding factor, but when I think about so many of these games that we all fell in love with first, and how a single battle as a child could cause you to rage quit 17 times, or even as an adult could cause you to rage quit 17 times, and yet you still go back and eventually figure it out. It's always been interesting to me that in something like an MMO, when you get to that kind of final battle, that you wouldn't, I don't know, that you would want to tune it down in a sense, because to me, that part of failure or that part of difficulty is also part of what gives us the emotional overcoming of challenge, right? So not that it has to be so brutal nobody can clear it, but enough that it feels like it matches and lives up to the stakes of what is narratively happening and what our sort of action arc is.
So when you win, you have that feeling of, oh man, that was crazy and I did it. I think a lot of it comes down to worrying about the judgment of others.
Yeah.
Because, they're, no matter where you go, especially in video games online, you're going to get those people who are like, that was so easy. Why couldn't you do that? Like, those people maybe need to chill out a little bit.
And the way that I think people tackle these things has changed too. I mean, one way to look at it, I think probably the intended way to look at it, right, is you go through and then you have the normal mode, and then you have the extreme trial that comes later. Like, let people get the story done, and then if they want a challenging fight, they'll get it next patch or something. And that's that's fine. It is what it is. But I think something that's changed a lot too is obviously like difficulty as you progress through the entirety of the game, which makes sense, right? But I think since 2010, the idea of, oh, we're all on comms now. Like, me having podcasted for 14 years, I totally have like anxiety about like going into Party Finder and like joining a bunch of randos on Discord. I can't do it. That's not me. That's not my thing. I know. I have a static, right? So it's okay, but it's like, and I know I'm not the only one. It's that idea of like, picking up, in Party Finder or Duty Finder, whatever. It's just, it's not for everybody.
MMOs are where that happens the most, just because MMO players, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush, just MMOs in general, the players who play MMOs and succeed at them are usually more hardcore. Look at Island Sanctuary. How many spreadsheets are there? Yes, Animal Crossing fans do that as well. But MMO fans, like, especially if you've played more than one, you are used to that hyper, like, okay, well, I got to do this. I got to hit this cap. I got to do that.
What's my best in slot?
Yeah, what's my
Yeah.
best in slot? You go
The gear's
to
not
do
out
that.
yet, but I know what it is.
Yeah, exactly, right? You look it all up and you get crazily prepared. And for some people, if they go into something and other people aren't as prepared, they go, oh, look at them. They're not doing any of this work.
Yeah, I mean, there
and
was some
you don't want
stuff
to be looked at like that.
going around this past week. Somebody that had tweeted about it.
Mhm.
And check my retweets. It was awful.
Yeah.
But it's also that idea too. I think, looking at MMO versus other games, right?
Mhm.
In an MMO, there is, regardless of how much time you spend with, say, like a pickup group in Discord, right?
Mhm.
You'll recognize those names walking around Limsa or something later on, right? There's it's that more community kind of a thing, right?
Sure.
Whereas you play Call of Duty, some 13-year-old kid said he had relations with your mom, you're never gonna run into him ever again, right?
Ugh.
So it's that, like, seeing other people, but like people will recognize names
Mhm.
more in a game like this, and kind of going off that that pressure or embarrassment of like not wanting to fail in front of other people. But yeah, so I think ultimately it's good that we do have the multiple difficulty things.
Yes.
It lets
Yeah.
people get
And
the
you know
story done, and then if
Mm.
people want the harder
Yeah.
challenge, we have extremes.
We not necessarily grouse, but when they go back and they change something, like recently they changed Steps of Faith to be
Mhm.
easier, and I guess a solo thing.
Mm.
It's more like, oh man, but that wasn't too bad. It really wasn't that bad, and they
Back
changed
in-
it in the first place.
Back in my
Mhm.
day, we had to do this, and
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I was bummed out when they changed it to begin with. I get why.
Yeah.
If you had one person amongst you who knew what they were doing, it wasn't that bad. If you didn't, it could have been pretty bad.
Mhm.
But when they change stuff, like a patch, not a patch, an expansion or two later. Actually, it's 3, isn't it?
yeah,
Wow,
it's
No,
been a
2.
while.
Either way, when they change stuff years and years and years and years later, I don't think that's necessarily terrible. I'll miss the previous one, but it also sort of streamlines things for people to get to the end.
Definitely. And I mean, Stormblood, it's interesting that we have this conversation right at the start of thinking about and talking about Stormblood, because when we were talking about Heavensward, we were discussing the fact that they have recently stated, with the return of things like Sephiroth in the, Unreal version, that Heavensward was a tipping point for them in sort of encounter design and difficulty thresholds. And yet, I think it was Stormblood where we actually saw that solidified, because it
Yeah.
felt like they were kind of pushing the envelope a little bit in certain regards in Stormblood, where we had certain things that I think felt much more like, oh, okay, well, let's take a look at the lower end of our okay, I say this with no judgment, like the lower skill end of our player base, and then let's look at the higher skill. This isn't to say that you can't still play this game and love it, just in like the regards to how they were going to try and meet in the middle for this, right? So they're looking at that skill floor, skill ceiling. And we got some stuff where I think for a lot of it, they did go much easier. And then we got a few fights where I think they were like, but let's just see if maybe we do this or we do that, how it's received. And from Stormblood beyond and after, even things like the class balancing, which we'll talk about, and all kinds of other stuff, really saw a shift in mentality and a shift in design that I think wouldn't really hit until Shadowbringers, but that was solidified, formulated, and like patched and adjusted and changed in many ways in Stormblood. So when we get to that, I mean, we will definitely get to that. But when it comes to like other initial thoughts about just what do I remember the most about Stormblood, just in general, right? Even beyond the Shinryu fight, I do remember the very first time that they unveiled Shirogane for us, or Kugane,
Oh
and
my
Kugane,
gosh.
and
Yeah.
I should say, although Shirogane is
trailer?
a part of it. Yes, yes, and I still to this day think that Kugane is my favorite city in the game. I think it's so beautiful. The details are unreal. All the little buildings and areas, and I just found that whole landscape to be so captivating, and I am glad because I also simultaneously felt like Alamigo was so disappointed.
Yeah.
But I still, to this day, will just go to Kugane because I just think they did such a beautiful job with the environment there. And I just want to see more of Hingashi and, parts of the region and Doma that weren't destroyed because there's so much gorgeous design in those
Yeah.
zones.
I
love
remember-
the like roof setup. It's a weird thing to say, but like
Yeah.
the way the roofs are set up and the way they have those strings of lights between them and how you can run along
The
the
jump
strings of lights
puzzles and
stuff.
yeah. I
good.
remember Square Enix invited me out to Frankfurt for that fan fest for Stormblood. And I remember sitting there with my little Bluetooth keyboard with my phone, like live tweeting like the stuff, right, as it was coming. And they play because this was the first time we had the full trailer. And so up to that point, we had gotten the fight on the Ralger statue, and that was kind of it. So like that scene goes, I'm like, okay, cool. Looked out a tweet, and the music keeps going, and then I look up, and I'm like, wait, what's going on? And it's like going across the map, and I'm like, ah.
It was the first time they did that too.
Yeah, that was the first time they did that, and it was. I think when I think back on that, I think it was, you look at the history that Final Fantasy XIV had up to that point, where you have a game that was made and helmed by people that worked on 11, didn't maybe work out so hot. Then they bring in Naoki Yoshida to salvage it, right? And then he creates the A Realm Reborn story, and then he kind of continues where the original more or less wanted to go with Ishgard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then by 1.0 lore, there's really one place that's left, right? Which is Alamigo. But at this point too, he would like to do his own thing and be able to create something new instead of just kind of building on what's already been established. So he's like, let's add the Far East too. May or may not have been a good idea, right? Depending on who you talk to. Right. But I think this was also the start of Yoshida really, not that he hadn't taken charge of the game many years before, right? But I think this was the first time where Yoshida really jumped in and said, okay, I want to create like a whole new area, and I want to do something that's mine. And I think, going back to talking about difficulty and stuff, I remember me and Aldi were lucky enough to be invited to the media tour for Stormblood. And yeah, Rook, you were absolutely right. They talked specifically mentioned raising that skill floor. I also remember them saying they wanted to reduce buttons and then also adding duty actions in like the same sentence. And you're like, what? That doesn't make sense. We're going to take out buttons, but also add buttons. It's like
I had totally forgotten that duty actions did start in Stormblood.
Also job gauges. Yeah, job gauges were new with Stormblood as well. That was interesting. I mean, it's
Stormblood
and then
set us up.
You get you coming off of what had been Final Fantasy up to that point. You're like, okay, Red Mage, like you literally couldn't play Red Mage without a job gauge. Like there's no way to like buffs or like you can't do it. And so that was really, really interesting to see.
I was so excited.
Yeah. Oh, buddy, you were excited. I'm so sorry.
I mean,
you can still switch over to it, throw up your rapier and puff your collar and.
Yeah, it's okay. Red Mage is its own thing because you've talked about this a lot, right? You've talked a lot about the fact, Aldino, I think we've had a lot of discussions about this recently. If you're going with the exchange, if you're going to penalize a class that has a utility, but then penalize it in some other way, and yet that utility is a very limited use or really doesn't matter that much in the long run or things like that. It can be good in very specific situations, but then you're seeing it be hampered. And I think this is even more relevant as well.
Oh, yes.
As we look currently at the world race and other things that were happening with a bit of this gap in the actual performance of classes, as we say, that has made it so that even high-end raid groups are not able to meet various checks. I think there's a lot to be said about this as we look forward. And we did see a lot of the start of this and solidification of this around Stormblood, right? But Red Mage still as a class with its flair, I
yeah.
was so excited in Stormblood because it is the like perfect aesthetic that I live for. Where you have that caster, but then also a duelist, and it's just so good. And the animations, and I even thought the quests and things were really fun
Yeah.
for this one. So while it has some other, maybe issues, I think that thematically both
Oh
Samurai
yeah.
and Red Mage were really exciting parts of the
really hit it.
release. Yeah, they were really cool.
Yeah, and Samurai with its kind of meld of ninja, but not really. You don't hit mudras to get your stickers. I remember as soon as we saw the gauge, we're like, okay, so you collect stamps. All right, how is this going to be different? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
I
I was
think
excited for Samurai. I
Mhm.
mean, I played a lot of Samurai in 11. And so
Right.
they're like, Samurai, and I'm like, cool. But then they're like, but also like mostly cloth armor. I'm like, no. But then like Omega came out. They're like, would you like some heavy armor for Samurai? And I'm like, yeah.
Right.
now, there is one thing that I think, personally at least, is one of the most memorable things from Stormblood that we have not yet talked about because
Here we
we gave it
go.
its own category in the outline, which is
Yeah.
Raubon Extreme, and to a lesser degree,
Yeah.
Pippin Extreme.
Part of the reason we praised the smoothness. What are words?
I don't
I
know.
don't
The
know.
smoothness of Shadowbringers' launch is because of this fucking duty block. Like,
Yeah.
so basically what this is, and I mean, this was a huge learning experience for Square Enix, right? When you jump into Stormblood MSQ, obviously, like, it takes you around a little bit, and then you're like, okay, and then you talk to Raubon, and you go into like a single player instance, and then you do that, and then you move on. But like, lots of people were playing the game at this point, to the point where like you just couldn't get into the instance because so many people were doing it. I can actively remember like waking up like the first week of Stormblood to use like the restroom, and I'm just like looking at my phone, and then somebody says like, I just got through Raubon. And I was like, I woke up my wife at 4 a.m, and I'm
Yeah.
like, they fixed Raubon. We should probably go do it right now so we can get past it. And she just gets, all right. And we like both walk out, log in, and like it was
I
awful.
love gamer couples because you both just get it. You both just fucking get it.
We understand. We know what's up.
I love the background to that is that a server died so we all may live. Like a server went down, it like completely crashed, and then it unblocked for a couple of data centers, right? Like
Mhm.
there was some big catastrophe where a couple of servers went down, and then everyone's like, oh, we can get in through Raubon. And I remember being on Reddit and watching people go, take my energy, I can't even log in. You do it. Go.
Yeah, I mean,
Bebop and I, we were the opposite. We are stubborn folks, and we refuse to submit. And I remember for 2 days straight, because Bebop stays up so late. Bebop usually stays up until like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I usually go to bed earlier, but for like 2 days straight, with the exception of maybe an hour or two when our sleep schedules, overlapped, we were just trying to get into the Raubon instance. And you just stand there because it was so funny. I actually loved this because to me, this is one of the most memorable moments of all of Final Fantasy XIV, because the community was coming together to try to troubleshoot something that we had no control over. Nobody could possibly dictate, but that we were all going to try our best to do anything to rectify. So we had people creating queues where you literally were just in a line, and in the line, everybody's like, now wait 5 seconds.
the Final
try
Fantasy
again."
XI method.
Yeah.
It was so funny. There were rumors flying left and right about exactly what hour would let you do it. There were rumors about if you did this fate and then came over, you'd be able to instance into Raubon. If you did all these things. I mean, everybody was just buying into whatever superstitious, like, if you do 3 circles in your room and pray to the 12,
And face north, and
Get on a VPN, it might help.
The thing I remember is because obviously like people had gotten past it, right?
Mhm.
I actively remember people being like, hey, I unlocked flight, you want to like just see the rest of the zone since you can't progress, and just find other people around that like had no right being on that other side of the map yet, but it's like can't do anything else yet.
usually when the expansion comes out, we do early morning streams on this channel right there. And I took the first shift, so I actually got through Rabon before there was a Rabon extreme. So I finished the expansion while some people were still chilling in that line.
Getting that gamer street cred there.
I don't know if it's street credit. I'm just gonna say I was lucky.
I did finally, when I finally made it in, I got about halfway through the fight and then it crashed.
No.
Oh no!
See, earlier we were talking about rage quits. I think that is the 14 rage quit right there. That is computer out the window levels of.
It was rough. I do think I got up. I think after the 2 days, I got up and I went like, I need to go for a walk. And I just like went outside.
Oh my god! I sat there for so long, just like at my computer. I got swollen feet. I remember that. Right?
Wow.
I was like,
really?
Yeah, I was like, that doesn't look right.
Wow.
I mean, because we all had gone through Heavensward and we knew it was going to be good, right? Like, we knew it was going to be great. So we were all just trying to get through Rabon Extreme. Like, I looked out and got through, I forget, I think when whatever server went down, I forget what Brave server it was. But then I got through and I just motored the rest of the way. I did not talk to anybody. I did not do it. The people
Hold
were like,
my calls.
you wanna go to this dungeon together? No, I don't. I'm just gonna go through as quickly as I possibly can.
I mean, it's
while
one
enjoying
of those
the story.
things. I mean, you know, obviously, like with A Realm Reborn and with Heavensward, like like you said, like the story, we were expecting great things from the story, and to get to a point where the game's just like, no, you're like, but story,
no.
but new things, and the game's just like, nope, sorry, your name's not on the list. It's like,
and it was so early into the expansion. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's funny because in some ways I do think it gave me more of an appreciation of that starting area because I mean, people, what were you doing? If you got sick of waiting in line, or, you know, like Bebop and I were trading off, waiting in the line to see, you know, can you get up there and can you get instanced in? Can you just click? Can you get into it? And when we weren't doing that, we were just doing fates in the area and just running around. And I normally try to explore anyway, but because it was so early on in the story, I do, funnily enough, still feel a really, I think, great sense of nostalgia when I go back to that.
You know every
initial
inch of the first part of the Fringes just by
Yes.
memory. You can just explore the whole thing in your mind.
Yeah, and like the water and the sort of russet colored trees in that area. I do think it's a beautiful little tidbit of a map right there. But also it was in an inescapable prison. We were all trapped in after having waited for months only to take the first steps in the new expansion and just be unable to continue. And it did raise so much discussion in the community, right? Because obviously everybody needs to take care of themselves. Don't, endanger your well-being, get food, take stretch breaks, exercise, even
Put your
while
feet
you
up.
are...
Don't do what Zen
put your
did.
feet up while
Learn
you
from her
are-
mistakes.
while you are cramming for a new expansion. But there is so much discussion in the community, and there was a lot of outrage during this, right? Because people had taken days off of work. People had taken vacation time. People, were really looking forward to this. And of course, as longtime MMO players, I think we all know that at a certain point, if you only have a day that you can take off, right, you should not do it the day of release because
it's like, especially like you look at Shadowbringers, and obviously they learned from this, right, with Shadowbringers, where early on they give you a fork. They're like, okay, either go see Alizé or go see Alphino, and that eliminated this kind of instance problem. But I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, things can go wrong. Like, it's just the nature of an MMO, especially one that's been getting more and more popular, like Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, I still remember when ARR launched, being at the launch event at what was PAX Prime back then, and they were having issues with queues and people couldn't log in. And I remember telling Yoshida, I'm like, well, like it's a problem, but it's like a good problem to have. And I could tell he was just like, no, it's still a huge problem. Like, it was really bothering him. Like, it's just, things are going to happen, especially with like a new patch or a new expansion. You're going to have people coming back. And so it's impossible to predict the kind of traffic that those servers are going to get,
It not exactly weird, but because I did get past Rabon so early on, I was there with my RP partner, and both of us are DPS. We're trying to level our DPS together first thing, and not only were DPS queues worse then, there weren't as many people available to run the stuff that was coming up. So queues were very long, which means that all of my quests in all of the Stormblood areas are done.
Yeah.
Which is not the
Yeah.
case in any of the ones after
Mhm.
that. Which is a little bit sad, but also I don't mind that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, they very clearly learned from that, and I think shifted
Mm-hmm.
how they divvy up some of the uh, load with that. And we also, I mean, at the time, we had different instances in servers. I remember that you know,
Yeah.
you'd had different instances of the maps, but even so, with that kind of narrative choke point, it was so difficult just to get people through that. With the way, at least, that it seems like they have structured some of their
Mhm.
instance content, and I guess how that operates on stuff like servers. I mean, and yet we are still seeing bits of that linger to this day with things
Right.
like the island sanctuary queue
Exactly.
problems
Yeah.
and other things there. So obviously there's something behind the scenes that doesn't flexibly scale, or maybe wasn't quite made in a way that is really conducive to these kinds of fluctuations in
Mhm.
population or demand for stuff like that. But I mean, they have found a lot of ways, especially in story, from Stormblood on, to try and make it so that that doesn't happen as much,
Yeah.
and that, you know, they're not just having player bases run into these kinds of issues.
Right.
And it's
You know.
given them we'll say street cred again, amongst all the other MMOs, that they have the smoothest launches,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like world famous for their smooth launches now.
I mean, it
You
was
know-
it was so weird coming into Endwalker after Shadowbringer. Like, Shadowbringers was the smoothest launch of anything I've ever seen. But then Endwalker, it's like, what do you mean there's login queues? Like, it's like
It's,
the
you know,
craziest.
We got
some point,
spoiled.
Yeah,
Capacity is inelastic. Like, it's you can't fix it. You have to fix it by teaching the players to do something else, or just making them do it, splitting them up, slowing them down,
Yeah.
not putting an instance at that point. But then it's just going to keep going further and further back, right? So it's like, okay, well, we got that done. You can get through the story. Well, now everyone's trying to get in the server so quickly that we can't. Okay, well, that's okay. Well, we got to fix that one too. Well, that one's inelastic. How are we going to fix that?
Yeah.
That's
It's
where
like,
we're going to be.
you know, like, day once expansion goes up, you know the servers are going to get hammered, but you're not going to, like,
Mhm.
go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for
No.
server hardware for the first week. Like, it's going to die down. Like, related, you know, we mentioned Island Sanctuary. Are you able to get into Island Sanctuary on Balmug now?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
See? Like,
It's like the third or fourth day there wasn't an issue.
It's
Until I-
calmed. It's calmed down.
yeah,
It's
fine.
fine. Yeah. So, like, they're not
Yeah.
going to spend the you know, the money to buff that up just for a couple days. Like, it's not practical.
Mhm.
But anyway,
How crazy would it have been if they released Island Sanctuary with the beginning of Endwalker?
Yeah.
oh man,
Would have been
that would have been cruel.
terrible.
Yeah.
Would have been a
Cruel.
shit show.
Horrible.
Yeah, would have been awful.
And they learned that.
Really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So next time you're upset about something being delayed a little bit, maybe think about that.
I mean, it's true. It's true. I think they have to really pay attention to how they're going to release and balance content in the game, right? And when players are going to be doing certain things, or they might want to propel through story, or, you know, various other things, progression, those sorts of things. So, yeah, no, Island Sanctuary was great where it is. But thinking of things that were introduced into the game, or new features, or new, you know, new things that we got to experience, going back to those Stormblood days, we already touched a little bit on the new classes, but we did get Samurai and Red Mage. So, between those, what do you think was your favorite addition? Which one did you like the most? Which do you think maybe has been the best long term as far as the jobs that we got in
See,
Stormblood?
I think that's a hard question, because I think in this maybe skips ahead just a smidge. I mean, I think with Stormblood especially, I think there was a very, very good spot to use Red Mage, right? I
Mhm.
mean, some people are like, Red Mage, what's that? Oh, Eureka Mage. That's okay. That
Res
job.
Mage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I leveled Red Mage for Eureka, and it was fucking amazing to have in there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
It's
it
true.
was wonderful. I mean, Samurai, obviously, it was another DPS. It was a fun DPS. having 2 DPSs, right? That kind of creates its own issue again with queues. We talk about, you know, trying to queue up with 2 DPS. So we haven't had that since then. Kind of another learning moment from Stormblood, but I think they're both okay. I think definitely that Red Mage is, I wouldn't call it a limited job, but I think it fills like kind of a niche void. Like when you look at content like Eureka and Boja, I think it's very, very, very good for that type of bigger open zone content. And I think it kind of fills a need that it can be filled by like a white mage or, you know, whatever. But I think
actually does a little bit of echoing from 11 at times, because
Yes, exactly.
if you aren't really comfortable in a tank and you want to go and solo something for whatever reason, Red Mage is really good for that.
Yeah.
You can heal yourself instead of using Jolt to proc your procs. Use Cure. Cure yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked Red Mage. Of the 2, Red Mage was definitely my favorite. I thought the playstyle was really fun. Just in general, Red Mage was very fun to play.
Yeah.
Even now and then, it's not necessarily, you know, the best damage class. It does have a lot of utility, as we always say.
Yep.
But I think the one that has had probably more of a lasting effect has been Samurai. There have been a lot of changes that
Because
have
of it,
involved Samurai trying to make Samurai work and be that selfish DPS that it is.
It felt
I always make
so
fun of Samurai.
OP when
that-
it came out.
Yeah, I always make fun
Yeah.
of Samurai. Take face, put on keyboard, move around. You're a good Samurai.
You can
I was-
freestyle.
I was always
It's
so
a
jealous
joke.
of just the timers on Samurai for like the
Yep.
you know like
I remember
stance
that.
timers and stuff. Not because, you know, there were, but because there weren't any. Like you could like get your stamps and they would just sit there forever. Meanwhile, I'm over here on Dragoon needing to like refresh Blood of the Dragon, and I'm like, I want to be more like that one.
So many Dragoons moved over at that point in time. Like that was a big point. I mean,
Dragoon
Reaper
was
even more.
such a clusterfuck of a
it's-
job at Stormblood. It really was.
Yeah, there's like Samurai and Red Mage, their jobs, that's cool, but like what they have done to the kind of balancing that then we have to think about. Stormblood, and I'm gonna say it, and it's a hot take. Stormblood is why we're in this position we're in now with bad balance. And it's like we haven't gotten into it. It's not specifically Samurai and Red Mage, but direct hit. This is when we got direct hit, and we got rid of accuracy, which is a great idea. Like we don't need to worry about accuracy. You remember having to get front accuracy in like, what is it, Coil?
I sure
Like-
do. I hated it.
I was leveling Conjure the other day, like a brand new Conjure, and I cast arrow on something and I missed, and I was like, "Excuse me,
Yeah. It's like,
Can
wait,
you
we
do
can
that
miss?
still?"
It
Yeah.
kind of, it took like something that, okay, you just had to hit a threshold and added more randomness, and they added a job that has really big hits, but it feels bad when you don't crit or direct hit. So well, how are we gonna fix that? Well, let's make it automatically happen, and you can see where we're going to where we get now. You know, and Red Mage is great, but it furthered along the whole utility taxing, especially for utility that's not always useful. Like if you don't have to raise, why are you doing less damage?
It's
I don't know.
having utility, and I think something is utility heavy, right? As like Red Mage, it feels really weird, and maybe like you know, on paper or, you know, at a glance, right? Maybe not the best idea in a game that doesn't have a role dedicated to classes with utility. Like it's a DPS, right? But it could also do this. But it's a DPS.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna make it do less
feeling...
DPS because, but it's a DPS.
You kind of end up feeling bad for Red Mage, because you take Red Mage in when you're progging, and as soon as you don't need those raises anymore, you switch to Black Mage or a different job entirely.
Whatever you can.
Something else.
Yeah.
And it's so rough, because I think thematically, like I talked about earlier, both of these classes, I like what they bring to the table. Samurai is, while it has those fantasy effects, it's also very elegant. I think it has some really beautiful visuals. I really like, the way that they, I think, made it very streamlined visually. Red Mage was everything I ever wanted. I love the backflips. I love the magic swords. I love the leap in for your combo. It's so good. All of that is so well done. But I absolutely agree. I think this was a point where, like we talked about, Stormblood had a huge resounding impact on all sorts of stuff moving forward, including encounter design and class balance and class design mentality. Because we had, at this point, Samurai introduced, which I think maybe did... My thought is that they were trying to implement a range of melee DPS skill ceiling, right? Because a lot of the other melee DPS, as a role at that point, and with some of the precedent from, the idea of having these slightly more higher skill ceiling classes that, was a thing they were trying to do in Heavensward, where this would be a specific category almost unto itself. I think they realized that melee DPS in particular just had some of the highest skill ceiling, most finicky, but also most potential for DPS out of the classes, which I actually kind of like, I won't lie. I feel like if you're going to play that kind of class and you have to take higher risks to be within range, then why not have a higher payoff for proficiency?
As long as there's risk, yeah.
Yes, to me, I find that rewarding, but I understand that other people might not if they resonate with the class for different reasons. So Samurai came in, but then suddenly we were having all these discussions about, well, Samurai can get the same numbers, but not have to do 50 of the finicky things that we have to do just to try and hit the same number. And from then on, almost all of the melee DPS balancing was almost centered around that. Although they did add some complexity to Samurai, it much more became about how do we make the other classes more in line with Samurai's skill play, so that, we're reducing some of the effort. And in certain regards, there really were changes that I think were good to make in making a class more intuitive, more streamlined, more, but at the same time, I think we lost a lot of complexity. Meanwhile, over with the healers, I mean, this is kind of transitioning us into our overall balance discussion from Stormblood. But meanwhile, over in the healers, we had what I felt was kind of one of the shining moments for Astrologian. Not necessarily because, I understand everybody's fishing for balance, right? But I think that they had in many ways nailed the kind of higher skill ceiling play version of Ast, where it was really rewarding. It was really fun. Again, if you could get everything to line up, it became so intuitive, so second nature. And yes, there was a much higher learning curve, but I switched from White Mage to Ast in Stormblood, and I mained Astrologian in Endgame because it was so much fun, and I found it so rewarding to play this little mini game. Meanwhile, because of things like the job gauges that had been introduced, White Mage was in the most baffling and bizarre place it had ever been in, because half of its abilities,
what the hell is this for?
Yes, you had there was no difference between having 2 or 3 lilies, but the water bubble shield that we have was, you could only do it with 2 lilies or something like that, but it didn't get stronger if you waited for 3 lilies. And then you had all these other things that were just these bizarre extraneous.
And I think a lot of that happened too because it was the job gauges, right? It's we have job gauges now. That means it has to do something for every job. We'll give White Mage flowers. Okay. What did they do? Stuff, I guess.
It's very strange. What the hell did Plenary Indulgence do? I don't know. I still don't know what it used to do to this day. I forget. It is gone from my brain.
Yeah. It was really... They were looking for a problem to fix with the job gauges. You know what I mean? Samurai didn't need it, but Red Mage absolutely needed it. And there's no way that design would have ever happened without that gauge, right? I'm sure it could have been something else before that, but then you have to backport that. And some of those applications were just downright dumb. And it took the entire expansion to fix it. The whole one. I was going through the patch notes
Yeah.
And just seeing the changes, like 4.1, the list of like job balancing patch notes are insane. Like so much potency, so much actual change to how it works too. Like so much stuff that they just no, this is the way it works. It works differently now because that's dumb. We're gonna change that.
Yeah.
4.1 was wacky.
Can I just say,
mhm.
are you? I'm sorry. Are you done?
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just say monk?
Yeah.
Like what?
What do you think?
Here's the job gauge, and also still keep up grease lightning, and also this other thing is kind of still also a job gauge.
Yeah.
It was messy. Monk was messy.
That's when they introduced True North as well. 4.0 is when they introduced True North, I do believe. Yeah.
That sounds
Bending.
right.
Yeah, they saw that it was a problem and they went, we'll do something to fix that. And positionals still get brought up. The reason that I, not very saltily, but I interjected in the melee part is that yes, if it is more risk to have to do your job, it should be more damage. I agree with that. But Stormblood was the start of it becoming not, right? Because True North, because some of the easing, I think Stormblood is the first time we ever had omnidirectional bosses as well. Like,
yeah,
I think towards the end, was Shinryu omnidirectional? Had to be, right?
probably. I remember a lot of stuff in Eureka was.
Phase 1 was. Yeah, Eureka had a whole lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that process of, okay, well, we've gotten it. Everybody likes this game now. Well, let's try and fix these little things. And, you overshoot in both directions when you try.
I feel like there's maybe not an equal risk, but having to be away from the boss, as a ranged DPS, you ought to try and be close to the boss when there's space anyway, because if you're not, you miss heals, you miss shields. So having to be away from the boss is at times just as risky as being next to it. You miss a shield, you're dead.
You literally have to move twice.
And yet we have seen them even adjusting that continually. I think from this Stormblood point onwards, which I hadn't really thought about, but you're very much right, because they kept expanding. In Stormblood, there was so much feedback about things like Astrologian Star, the size of, Sacred Soil, these sorts of things. And because arenas aren't, again, they're not like leaning into that, where we have massive arenas, and as a part of ranged and part of why you would bring ranged to the table, they have to go far out beyond the radius of those things, and then they get some big payoff for it, and they're moving around, or they're going to different platforms that other people can't, but they can still reach, or whatever. We haven't seen them lean into that, so it is something where yes, we've seen them ease that more and more and more over time, which is both good in many ways, because I don't know, is it fair that we have an entire DPS subsect that has to do a thing in the game that no one else ever has to worry about when it comes to things like directionals? Maybe you can argue against it, maybe not. I don't personally find positionals to be super, super fun myself, but I do think that they add to the class fantasy. They add to the distinction of the play style of that role. And they are very, they give you a different challenge than a fight to work around and position around, which I think is good, right?
Yeah.
And they also barely matter now.
Well, and
that's the other thing.
I think too, right? The way that I would view it, I mean, aside from like the rotation, which like you're never gonna hit, right?
Why not?
Like, well, you fat finger a key, or you know what I mean? Like you're never gonna have that like machine perfect every encounter, right?
I believe in you.
Oh, thanks. I don't. But like the idea of having those positionals, that's really all that is there in terms of like being able to, that little bit of like ceiling, that little bit of improvement.
That's
when it
the
comes
only
to,
difficulty.
That's it. It's just positionals, and it's just like I don't know. I've always thought that they're dumb. But it's also the only thing that we have in order that to differentiate us from that. So
because uptime is 100% almost all the time. You look at like the current. We're looking at current, and I won't go into it too much because that's a whole nother show. That's
an entire show. Yeah.
Oh man, that's a big topic right now. But you look at things like P7, and you go, when do you not have uptime? And there's also no positionals, right? So it's like they realized that it was something that gives us the pop, but also something that's super annoying at times. So
Yeah.
they reduce it. But it's just so weird that this was the start of that with True North, because they went, oh yeah, that's annoying. And then they went, oh, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't lock your combo behind positionals for most jobs either. So let's do that. And now you get to the point where Monk has like 2.
Yeah.
And
It's
they
fun
almost
to
don't
watch a
matter.
monk who's been doing it for a while because they still do the
Yep,
positionals.
they still
for
do it.
everything.
It's such a weird
Yep.
take, because it's like, it's annoying moving into the flank or the rear, or like all these things. You know what's also annoying? Having to hit another button when you're like standing on a different side of the map. Like it's so weird. Like, I don't know. You want to talk about saving buttons? Just don't add that and get rid of positionals. That saves buttons. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's a whole
Well,
episode.
thinking as well, because we had the questions here at the start of this talking
Mhm.
about, Red Mage, or,
Yeah.
in chat, I even saw a bit of discussion, like, what do we do to make a class, like this more interesting or more valuable in certain regards, or, to make their utility something that's more
Yeah.
part of active ongoing engagement with the class and that has more longer
Mhm.
term kind of, relevancy. I have been so inspired recently, and we don't have to touch on this for too long, but I have been so inspired recently by even the PvP changes that they did,
Yeah.
where we started to see them, I think, playing with concepts for these classes that
Mhm.
add something different. The fact that you can almost ley line into your black magic aspect or your white magic aspect with red mage as it plays
Mhm.
now, buffs and debuffs that become a part of that. I do think around this time in Stormblood, they made this choice that a lot of these utilities, after this, they implemented, right? A lot of feedback that hit when we came into Shadowbringers. But the idea of utility becoming narrower and narrower and narrower. And we were in this moment in Stormblood where I think they could have introduced more things, more mechanics, more stuff that utility specifically would address, because it's never just adding one thing to a class, right? It's about how does this then respond to something in the greater scheme of mechanic design, combat, these sorts of things, right? So Stormblood Beyond, we started realizing that much of the community, as most MMO communities are want to prioritize things like just strict, reliable uptime of damage buffs, right? But there was this window of opportunity in Stormblood where I think we could have seen certain things address this more. I mean, I'm even thinking now about some of our Endwalker raids with this ongoing tick of bleed damage that it's so
Yeah.
prevalent, and the fact that they do seem like they have really created and solidified a role for shield healers, because or even some of the utilities that we have with reprisal, right, and things like that, because there are literally some hits in the savage versions of these fights that you cannot survive with the current tier of gear unless it is mitigated in some way. So again, you can create opportunities for utilities to have a specific role to play in your game, but it's about expanding that. Unfortunately, through Stormblood, I do think we saw that the era shifted to a much more narrowing of utility usage, which then has led us kind of where we are now. So, right, it's like a domino effect as we go through. Even though we had some shining periods, I think, where balance was really tightly knit, it is maybe from Stormblood on started to domino a little bit,
Yeah.
and how it would lead us to now, which is interesting.
I was actually thinking earlier, things like the DPS actually really having to use feint. You have to use feint. If you miss feint, a couple of people are gonna die. That actually reminds me more of how you had to handle things in Coil, which is something that I miss like a lot.
Yeah.
Pay attention to everything that you have. Use your whole kit.
Yeah. Utility damage buffs are not utility, they are damage buffs. Utility is things that help you clear it, things that make it easier, things that help cover mistakes, right? Like that's utility. And from Stormblood and into Endwalker or not Endwalker, into Shadowbringers, because I'm sorry, like when we talk about Shadowbringers, I'm going to talk about Dancer a little bit, and I don't talk about Dancer.
A whole other episode.
Yeah, it's a whole nother episode. But it's like, here's where they started going, all right, yeah, utility. Well, that just means damage. That's all people care about. So we're going to shift it a little bit. And it's not great. I mean, this is when we start getting into really the 2-minute buff cycles. that everyone has to align to, which is great. That makes it easier to design buffs and things, and you know your raid feels better in that way. But it also is super strict, and if you are a job that doesn't adhere to it, you're screwed. Paladin.
When was the last time we had to use an interrupt on anything in Savage? 1 million years ago. It's
Yeah,
been
I
a
think
long
so.
ass time. That is something we should be using.
Yeah.
Interrupt
Gosh.
more. Yeah, I think Stormblood
I
for
can't
me really was my favorite time for Astrologian because
Mhm.
even though, again, high-end gameplay, that fishing for balance, I
Yeah.
personally did find that I used a wide array of things, you know? The utility of, oh no, well, some people died, or MP is out, or, you know, this has been a brutal 24-man, so let's just try and recoup and help with MP. We've got this ewer, let's spread it. New tanks, lower gear, minimum eye level, having something like the bowl did help cushion things sometimes, although
Mhm.
as you were talking about Aldino, there were so many potency adjustments and changes and tweaks and
Yeah.
all kinds of things over the course of Stormblood that I think we saw a lot of those things become more and more and more niche situational, you know. And I mean, some of that is just inherent to some of the problems that they have faced with, again, how do we make utility work on a larger scale in 14? But at the very least, I felt like with the ability to enhance the potency of a specific card or spread a card to everyone or
Mhm.
do these little things with the cards, that there was more variety of how I could play that class in
Mhm.
such a way that it felt as though, oh, here's some utility that I'm really enjoying in the game. So in many regards, I actually really loved Stormblood for that. And I really enjoyed that moment before we turned more drastically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting moment. I mean, we can push forward as well. I don't know if there was anything else specifically with balance we wanted to address. There was the direct hit and tenacity
Yeah.
changes, the
Oh
piety
yeah, I
changes.
forgot about tenacity.
Yeah, they added tenacity, which is a stat that still nobody wants to use. I mean, you know, it's the way it goes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's about
that's
it.
it.
I mean, direct hit adds more random, which is not as fun. It was exciting at the time because it wasn't accuracy. That was nice.
So then one of the other things they did with or I should say didn't do with Stormblood was a new race. With Heaven's Word we had Aura, but nothing new with Stormblood. And I think ultimately, like, I think I'm okay with that, because you know, when we on our Heaven's Word episode, one of the biggest gripes that we had was, oh, we have this new race, cool. Who are they? Where are they from? We want to
Yeah.
know more about them. We got that with Stormblood. So like they were still kind of patching up the iffiness like with the last added race with this expansion. So I think I was fine that we didn't get anything this expansion. And we got the Asm Step, which is like great.
Yeah.
More lore about these characters that we've had for a couple of years.
I see why they did give us a race there, because it's the first expansion. You want to set a precedent. You want to give people as much as you can plausibly for this thing where it's like, all right, this didn't fail. We got to keep making it not fail. So, you know, while I do think it would have been nice if maybe Aura had come out with this expansion where all of the information about them was, I see why they did it with Heaven's Word.
Yeah.
I agree. What's funny is that rather than, okay, as it stands, I don't mind that they didn't include a race in Stormblood. I mean, we got a lot of other things and the world was really vast. And the Azim Step is one of my absolute favorite parts of all of Stormblood. I thought that zone, its storytelling, its action, its mini story, its characters, the way that they gave life and vibrancy both between that and then also stuff like, you know, when you dive under the Ruby Sea and you get to actually see some of the, you know, culture on either side of the Aura. All of that was so well done. I loved it. It's funny because I do actually think that I almost would have preferred that they release Aura with Stormblood. And then either we got, again, I don't, like you were saying, I don't think not having a new race for your first expansion, I think that added more punch to, you know, here we are, we really want this to continue to succeed. But I almost feel like they could have done an entirely different race in Heavensward, be it, I don't know, instead of getting the, what are the name of the bird people up in the sky? Vanu Vanu? Like, instead of getting the Vanu Vanu, we actually just have some kind of new bird-like pseudo, you know, like the a humanoid with bird traits race or something, and their culture is that they live up there, and we just hadn't seen them because of this division between, you know, the land and sky and these lost regions that the dragons had been protecting
That's
for so long or
yeah.
something. You know, I think to me that would have made more sense because as it was kind of weird, and everybody was going, so the Aura are dragons then? But then in lore they were saying, no, they're not dragons. And it's like, but it's a dragon expansion.
It's one of those tricky things where I think any MMO, anytime an MMO adds a new race, they're like, oh, where did they come? Oh, they've been here the whole time. We just haven't seen them. Just go with it. Just go with it. You know, and thinking back, technically they did add a new race with Stormblood. Just not a playable race. They added the Lupin with Stormblood.
Yeah.
And then
People ever
Shadowbringers
since then.
came out and they're like, no, we're doing Hrothgar instead. And you're like, but you have this over here already. They could probably wear more hats.
Fair.
I found a way to
At
bring
least
it
a
back.
couple.
Yeah, so I think this was fine. They were still kind of finishing up Aura, I think, with Stormblood in terms of just including them into the world. One of the other things that was big for Stormblood was fishing, or not spearfishing, but also swimming, right? We're like, okay, with Heaven's Word, we got to fly around, now we're gonna go and swim. But it was kind of weird because like so many other MMOs that have swimming and have had swimming since launch, right? You know, whether it be WoW or something like Guild Wars, sometimes you have your own underwater weapon set. But for Final Fantasy, they're like, okay, so here's how this is going to work. Going underwater is kind of like zoning, but kind of not. But also you can't fight anything. And it's like, okay. It was kind of weird.
I still to this day don't know if I like it or not because like underwater fighting is boring in every game, maybe except Guild Wars 2. I remember being super jazzed about it at the beginning of Guild Wars 2. I don't know how it is
Guild
now.
Wars 2. It's hard,
Right.
or it was.
I loved it. I remember I was playing like a hunter or a ranger or something, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got a crocodile. Let's go. You know, it actually switched to crocodile when I went in the water. Like that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
But in 14, I don't think that I would have wanted it. Like I don't think so.
It was one of
It
those
would have
things.
been the same.
It was good for exploration, and I mean, you know, I remember, you know, the first couple of weeks, people were like, yeah, so I was swimming around in the Ruby Sea, and I found like this Easter Island like head just like buried underwater. We're like, what? That's really cool. Like that was like the only thing like that. But like, you know, more of that, please. But it was really cool for like an exploration thing. I think the Ruby Sea area is probably like the best utilized underwater type stuff because there's, you know, things you can swim under and into like little caves and stuff. But it's overall it's
The
just
Locks
kind
had
of
some
like,
cool stuff in it.
the Locks did have some cool stuff, but it was one of those inclusions where it felt like they, you know, after Heavens were like, well, we can fly, oh, we can't swim yet, let's add some water stuff. But like then they're just like, yeah, now you can swim, and that was it. Really, like, it was cool. There was some cool settings stuff that they did with it, but it was all right.
I agree. I don't think it is as revolutionary as Flight.
Yeah.
In the sense that Flight offers such a massive convenience in movement, and obviously then had ripple effects even to the original game, where they eventually made it so that you could unlock Flight and fly in those zones, right? And of course, Flight as a mechanic always carries with it a double-edged sword. You're dealing essentially with the fact that players will now take the absolute shortest from point A to point B kind of navigation. So games have dealt with this, like 14 with Ether Currents, Guild Wars 2. You have to work through a whole bunch of other stuff and do some special collections because while they have a huge range of mounts that do all kinds of really unique movements, like teleporting or this stuff, right? Or, you know, going underwater or skimming over the surface of water or doing horizontal jumps. They have like a really unique movement thing in Guild Wars 2. Even so, those flight mounts, you have to work much more extensively to earn. And even they have their own pros and cons, drawbacks, unique mobilities, speeds, those sorts of things. When it comes to stuff like WoW, oh my gosh, unlocking flight was one of the most annoying things ever. And I was so miserable when I was trying to play that as a new player because they, you know, try to make you, they force you to be grounded until you've spent so much time and money and got, you know, to get to the point where you can unlock the ability to fly. So 14, I think, has a pretty good balance, that the ether currents can be annoying, but they're not impossible. And flight obviously changes a lot of things. And in Heavensward in particular, I think they did an incredible job of monopolizing the vertical space that flight offered.
Yeah.
And I even think that they can do more of that in, you know, our future expansions, because they kind of eased back. But having a world that's not just like this, but that can also have discoverable things, important things, story beats, stuff like that that are at different elevations can be really exciting. Conversely, swimming has not had that impact. And
At all.
I think a lot of it is just because really the Ruby Sea is the only map that we have that is predominantly underwater. But even there, almost all of your story beats take place not in the water, but, you know, in the settlements and stuff. But still, having a world that gives you, from the deepest ocean to the highest heavens, a realm to explore and landscapes to explore is, I think, ultimately really beneficial and really good for fantasy and the fantasy genre. So I'd like to see them use more of underwater, because one of the things I also remember the most from Stormblood is the first time that you see the what's the palace underwater called?
Is that Suinosato?
Shisui?
Suinosato.
Shisui? No.
Shisui is the dungeon.
Yes, but so Suinosato is the settlement of Aura beneath the waves, but the palace, the Ruby Palace,
It might be Shisui then.
Yeah, it might be. I think
Shisui of the Violet Tides. Shisui of the Violet Tides. Is that what it is? When you have to like go through that ravine and it's dark and you're like going deeper and deeper, and I get nervous underwater. I have that like underwater deep water fear. So you're like going down and you're getting more and more nervous. And then at the end of this deep ravine, you see this bubble and this unbelievable palace, which is where you unlock the dungeon, right? That is still a really massive fantasy moment.
Because that's like down there too. You gotta it gets dark, and
but outside of that, flying or swimming is basically just worse flying. If they remove the water, it would be easier to get around. You would lose nothing in that zone, and it sucks because like I really don't know, and that's an assertion I just made. Maybe I'm wrong. Do you agree that if you went to the Ruby Sea and just removed the water?
I'll actually disagree, because when you could mount up in the water, that's as fast as flying, isn't it?
Yeah,
Jump
that's
in
what
the
I
water,
mean.
go down.
That's what I mean. You could just not have water and you would never have to worry about it, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like if those
I don't know, I really like the water.
Yeah. But I'm like, what did it give us?
Scenery.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Ambiance.
yeah.
That's fine with me though.
Yeah, I know, but it's like
No, I agree with you. I honestly do agree with you. I think they could have given us something more in the water, even if it was just more side quests that take you through, or things to discover, or lore stuff, or unique sightseeing. Or I agree in that it does feel like I love the underwater scenery and I don't want to lose it. I would just like to see them fill it out more. Spearfishing is really fun, actually, with the changes and things that they've done since Stormblood. But it'd be nice to have more things that make this world alive in that aquatic sense, you know?
Just imagine they just put a fake skin of water over Korthus, right? Let's say that zone, because remember when we were talking about Heavensward, it was that first zone that we're like, oh my god, it's so vertical. Imagine if it was half water, but they didn't change anything and just made it look different. That's what they could have done for the Ruby Sea. It's what I'm saying. Like, it seemed like it took them a lot of work to get that transition into water and whatever unique things there are about swimming versus flying, but it's like, why?
I think it's obviously like, right, there's the idea of like, okay, they did Heavensward, and then the next one they go down, like maybe 7.0 will be Fathomsward. They'll give us all metal boots, and then we can fight underwater. I think it's just one of those things. It's a world immersion thing.
Yeah.
It also I had this thought a couple of minutes ago. It gives gatherers a nice change of scenery. It's like, I'm gonna go mine underwater. Cool. Like, I'll take it.
You were just saying, like, you know, you go up and then you go down. Maybe we'll get the part where we go full fathoms. And I went, we got that. The Tempest. And Alduino's thought about, what if you just drained it?
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, I was like, Oh.
It was
But they-
moving towards there.
But they did, yeah, they
But
did.
Yeah.
what we
mention
did,
that.
Bismarck was just like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna just burp a big air bubble over
And
here
it's
for
still
you.
an underwater zone that seems like an underwater zone, and they didn't have to put swimming in it. That's what I'm saying. I'm like,
Which is actually really
That's funny.
interesting because
Yeah.
to me, it feels like that zone, maybe not in the second half, but in the 1st
Mhm.
half, it feels like that zone could have been even more dynamic in a sense. If you literally like watched as around you the Sahagin swam and, you
Mhm.
were seeing this life and these like swimming past these real remnants of buildings, and then you were able to kind of like go into parts of them to like learn little bits or something about the ruins or I don't know.
They could have
is
done an
something where-
easy fix where you take the MSQ, those that didn't get the Kojin blessing in Stormblood, you just go back to like, hey, can you hook them up? And then you go, well, of course they weren't, they were still stuck on the first. So maybe
Well, they also
maybe
needed to
just take a
limit where
smaller
you
party.
could go.
Yeah, it's true. But
Just
what I'm
metal,
saying
metal
is,
shoes. It worked for Link in Ocarina of Time. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
Ruby Sea, were like, there could have been more down there, and the Tempest is the bottom of Ruby Sea done as best as they possibly could have done,
Mhm.
and it's without swimming because swimming limits them. So that's what I'm saying. Like they've added this,
Okay.
and it just limits them, and it's cool. It's I don't want it gone, but what I'm saying is, why was it so difficult? Why did they go through with it? And then why did they never use it again? Probably because it's annoying, right? Like, I don't know. It's just weird to me. Like, what we get it a little bit in Endwalker because you have to swim for like a split second, twice maybe.
I don't know. I definitely see your point here. I agree that it does feel like it could be fleshed out. I don't mind it. I like that it's in the one zone, super prevalent in the one zone. It's not really anywhere else. Yes, we swim around a little bit in the locks, but it's like directly to this
Yeah.
place. I like that swimming's in the game though, because then
Yeah.
we have like our neighborhoods where there's
Yeah.
pools in the middle and you go chill with your friend or whatever. I think that
Mhm.
it should at least be there for that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of, load balancing and dev team time and things
Sure.
like that, which you can't speak to because we're not on that team. But it's like, I would have liked more to come out of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it adds a beautiful dimension to our world that I definitely miss in worlds that don't have it. It's
Right.
very strange in any world when you are like, you run to the edge of the water, you're in an open world or something, and then there's just an invisible wall, or you die the moment you set foot in the water. And it's like, okay, you're telling me I can fell literal gods, but my boots can't get damp.
Mhm.
Can't swim. Can't do it.
Yep.
It definitely creates an immersion discrepancy. But I agree with both sides. I am glad that we got it, and I do think the Ruby Sea is a beautiful zone. But I also think that there is much more utilization that they can do of this
Right.
within a fantasy setting. And, it would be wonderful to see some of that. And we've had maybe some little tidbits or mentions about, things lost under the waves or hidden
Mhm.
cities or stuff. So I think it would be fantastic to get to explore that more in a dynamic way, or really use it as part of building suspense, tension. and-
You're just mad because they didn't do Blitzball.
Remember
Who, me?
Blitzball?
No.
That
Also
was a
that,
thing.
yeah.
They were
Yeah.
talking that up for a while, and then
Well, that is kind of a use for underwater
It is.
mechanics, though. You know what I mean?
Maybe Blitzball is a Mericidian thing.
Yeah, maybe. Could be.
That'd be cool. That'd be fun.
I'm just imagining a bunch
Um,
of dragons playing Blitzball now.
Cute.
Yeah.
So if we scoot on from underwater, which is one of the features, Stormblood also brought us a cast of villains,
Oh, here we
some
go.
of whom
Mhm.
Bushbergers.
would resonate and or be relevant for years to come. And I'm curious for all of you, who is your favorite Stormblood antagonist or villain?
People
to
are
you.
going to be so confused right now. Xenos.
You should.
Xenos was a great villain because all throughout the 6.0 MSQ, he beat us. He was the only person that defeated us, and he did it multiple times. Now, it's a little weird that at the end of everything, he merged with a big dragon, became even more powerful, and then we were able to defeat him to the point where he decided to kill himself. That's a little weird.
I mean, it
But
makes
up
perfect
until
sense to me.
up until that point, he was the best villain we had. And then the 6.x patch series happened, and it was just awful.
We did bring 7 friends, though.
It's true. I mean, we bring 7 friends, he merges into a dragon. We keep it equal,
Yeah. But I know,
Yeah.
I think throughout MSQ, I think Xenos is a great villain. And then they did the weird thing where they brought him back, but kind of didn't bring him back. And it just dragged on forever. And he felt like he was robbed of all his personality in the process. Because they drug it out for so long. And that's why ultimately at the end of the day, I hate Xenos. But in 6.0, I thought he was great.
That's true.
There's
I do
so
recall.
many good characters. And yeah, I actually it's tough. I have favorites based off of different things in a sense because in the patch stuff Yotsuyu would become one of my favorite
I was gonna say
villains,
in
and I
terms of
think-
like characters you would want to step on you, I think Yotsuyu's over here.
Well, but I also love her story. She's so wonderful in so many ways. I mean, we've seen recently okay, so if you are
Oh
an
yeah,
anime
I did keep
watcher-
saying 6.0. I'm sorry. I meant 4.0. 4.0.
4.0.
Yes,
4.0. Base
4.0.
Stormblood, Xenos was great. After that, he's trash.
Yes. So, Yotsuyu as a character is fantastic in so many ways, right? Because she even harkens back to if you're a fan of anime and you have watched the most recent arc of Demon Slayer, I won't lie. I love Demon Slayer, and the first season is one of my favorite anime of all time. But as somebody who actually has a pretty big passion for history, and I research weird little niche bits of it, oftentimes because of role playing, I won't lie. And I may or may not have a character myself that is Hingashi based, who is an equivalent to an Oiran, which is a really fascinating and interesting and terrible part of Japanese history. And Yotsuyu herself is a character that was from that kind of time period and era. The Oiran were essentially like very, 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 very high class prostitutes within Japan during the time that crossed over into like the flower and willow world. This rise of geisha in response to things like Oiran, but also taking young women who oftentimes were a financial burden on their families and selling them into these pleasure houses where they would just sit. Like, if you weren't an Oiran, if you hadn't, been given a ton of training and, you weren't beautiful enough to be invested in that way, you were just you literally sat in like open galleries where people would just pick whoever. And you'd be behind bars and they'd pick you. And, many women died to disease, to, unexpected pregnancy, to all of these different things. So there was a really dark side to it, while there was also some really incredible cultural stuff that came out of it and some incredibly powerful women. Like, Oiran were fantastic. They were oftentimes referred to as castle topplers because they had the power to change the minds of, even those who were of the highest rank. They were considered the epitome of women in many ways. So there's like this really amazing, rich history. And Yotsuyu is a character that does that. She herself was, a woman who was sold into this kind of cycle, who then rose up through the ranks, who was highly valued, and then took power for herself even further when this regime came in. And I love those complexities of her character. So she's one of my favorites. But likewise, I actually think Xenos is phenomenal in this expansion because he is a, removed... I don't know. He is the product of his empire. And this is a whole expansion dealing with the Garlean invasion and their imperialism and his indifference to this, while all these other people are vying for all these other things, is so phenomenal because it creates such a great foil against other villains like Fordola, who betrays her own people just to survive, like Yotsuyu, who clings to whatever power she can get and then hoards it to almost get vengeance against the horrors her own people inflicted her to. It's so good! It's like, it's all so good! And Xenos' instance where he invades what's the word I'm looking for? Rhalgr's Reach?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He almost
Where
kills
he-
Y'shtola.
Yeah.
Like, damn.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Like, that's one of my favorite villain duty instances. It feels so, like, terrifying. You realize in that moment that they've had the power to crush this little tiny rebellion the whole time. Of course they did.
Yeah.
It's just that they've been letting you reveal yourselves. And, like, I loved that part. It's so good.
And you
So-
lose. I think that's the most important part. You lose. You do not defeat him. Like, yes, you fight him in an instance to get from point A to point B where you get his health bar down. But ultimately, like, he defeats you in combat. Like, you have people down. Like, that's what I loved so much about Xenos. It's not that, like, oh, here's the bad guy, we beat him, yay. It's this constant MSQ, this constant story of getting beat down time and time again. That I thought made Xenos.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna say, okay, so maybe that was like a little taste of it, but we really saw that in Endwalker. Let's be honest.
Sure.
So I think fave is an interesting word here because are we talking like our favorite ones to hate or our favorite ones? If we're talking, okay, so first I'm gonna say about Xenos, I never liked him ever. Even in the beginning, even when he was kind of okay, I always thought he was creepy and gross and I didn't want anything to do with him. Turns out he was always creepy and gross and we never wanted anything to do with him. My favorite Stormblood villain to hate is Asahi. Fuck that guy.
Ooh, yeah.
So terrible. And that's partially because my actual favorite Stormblood villain is Yotsuyu. I love the whole, like, everything that Rook said about the history of where she probably came from and the shit that she was put through by her family, including Asahi.
Yeah.
For her to turn around and obviously be very twisted by it, but to grasp the power to be able to do something about it. Always thought that was a great storyline. Hers is a very twisted, terrible storyline that's very, very interesting. So she's my favorite. And my least favorite villain, or most favorite villain to hate, is Asahi. He's crazy. He's more crazy than Xenos. I'm just going to say that. I think he's more crazy than he's the fanboy to the Nutter, right?
Yeah.
He is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He's the
more
Nutter
crazy.
Butter.
Xenos has
Because he
always
less
had
agency.
some air of like not caring, right? Whereas
Yeah.
Asahi is just like
Obsessive.
he's like if like Heath Ledger's Joker was like
Yeah.
thrown into the middle of like a war
That's-
in Hingashi.
That's the thing about Xenos in Stormblood, especially because we can go back and look at it now with new ideas, right? But Asahi and Xenos are very similar. Xenos has power, Asahi doesn't.
Yeah.
Asahi does everything he does to get the power to, quite frankly, dick to people who are dicking him, right? And go crazy and do it. Xenos already has the power and has nothing he wants to do with it. Nothing.
Yeah.
It's like
What do you get the
I don't
man
have
who has
anything else to do.
everything?
I have nothing else to do. Let's just fight about it, I guess. Right? And they are such the same. Like, these three characters, Asahi, Xenos, and Yotsuyu, came from similar-ish backgrounds turning into a monster. Not in the same way. Asahi and Yotsuyu had almost nothing. Xenos had everything except for anyone who cared at all in any way, shape,
Emotional
or form.
support of any kind.
Yes.
His dad
he
never
was an
hugged him.
experiment the entire time.
Well, they kind of
And no one
all were
understood.
lacking that.
Yeah, exactly.
Asahi had it somewhat because he
Mhm.
had the support of his family.
Yeah.
Yotsuyu didn't have shit.
Nothing.
No.
And,
then
you know,
she gets it because she gets it later. And you see the difference that love made in her life
Yeah.
where the slate wiped clean, but she realizes that like her actual crimes can never truly be forgiven. And it was so tough because I was both so angry when she dies and also so it's so good though. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because you can't just wipe the slate clean, not when she has inflicted so
Just
much
let
pain
her
and misery on others.
Enjoy her dongo and
They fucked her too. I've said it
Yeah.
way too many times, but they're like, all right, well, so you're doing pretty good over there, and looks like they might forgive you. Except you want to turn into a primal and have them kill you instead. Yeah, you want to do that? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What? That part,
Yep.
that part was a little. I don't know if that made entirely sense, but you know,
Well-
she, as I've said several
Yeah.
times, she's a little twisted. So you
To
know,
me-
in the end, she kind of threw back.
To me, it made perfect sense because she finally remembered everything she did and went, I can't live. I got to do something else. I don't deserve to live. So I'm
feel
gonna
like
take
that
out
would have been
people.
her path, though.
I mean,
Ah.
I think it depends. There's such the great symbolism
How
as
do you
well. But the
forgive that?
item, yes, the item she looks into as well that gives her
Mhm.
this power is a mirror. I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
is really telling
yeah.
because it's the idea of I mean, she found a sense of innocence that she was never given in her actual lifetime. But at the same time, I think she realizes that those walls that she built and that viciousness and that like kill or be killed world, that do whatever you have to do to survive, and make the other people who belittled you, who used you, who, I mean, literally mentally and physically used her, who like all these things, make them never be able to do that to you again. And then realizing, I think herself facing that mirror of what it means to be somebody that was subjugated to that she herself perpetuated the system that had harmed her, right? Like, and there's this idea that like, yes, if somebody had given her love and she got it for this brief moment, but how do you live knowing, I guess, what you've done to harm others when you've
Okay, so
sensed that? I don't know, it's so
ref-
great.
refresh my memory because
Mhm.
maybe it's just me remembering incorrectly. She was in Castrum Fulminus. Was she there to attack them, or did she just happen to be there when she was given the mirror? Like, who was she going to attack?
She was captured, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was
Didn't
captured.
Asahi capture her and
Asahi,
drag
yeah.
her there?
They basically
Yeah.
they basically forced it on her. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
but like, who was she going to use this power on? Is what I need to know.
Nobody.
Anybody.
then-
Nobody and
yeah.
anybody, I would guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
Like,
so
'cause
she wasn't focused on anything.
No,
I feel
think-
like if she'd have known that she wasn't going to be focused when she got the power, maybe she wouldn't have taken it, because I definitely could see her wanting to still take revenge. That was so part of her core character. But when that is taken away, why would you take the power?
to kill them. That's always how I read it. That like it
It-
wasn't just necessarily like Asahi is.
Yeah.
I don't oftentimes get a little bit spicy here, but I'm gonna get a little spicy. Asahi's a little
Okay.
shitlord.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. It's absolutely true.
He's a little piss baby shitlord. Like, let's be real. Everyone here today, we can agree on this. I
Mhm.
think.
It's terrible.
And and
So she definitely wanted to use the power to kill Asahi. That's what I'm
That's-
trying to get at.
Yes, that's my guess. I think, honestly, I think there is ambiguity in this. I think you can read this as her believing that there is some semblance of power that she could claim that would literally put her on par with godhood, that she has nothing else to lose, that she can't live with what she's done, but she also doesn't want to die because she's always fought for this. And so if she can claim a power that nobody else can, it will truly finally at long last free her from these bonds, whether it's, you know, to please the Garlean Empire, to please anybody. Or I think you could also read it as her wanting that final vengeance, you know, where she's going, if I use this power, I can kill that little piss baby shit.
Yes.
Right.
But
Which
the
she
thing that really
does
gets to
do.
me, like the hang up for me is she's taking the power from, he is offering her this. This is clearly a trick. Do not trust this motherfucker.
I remember that her brain was still broken. Then she realized, then she used the mirror in quick succession. Right?
I suppose.
It
Like,
all
remember that-
happened pretty quick. from
Yeah,
what I can remember.
she had no idea. Then she remembered how bad she was, and the mirror was there, right then in that moment. And in that moment, what, you're captured already. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, are you gonna go back to the bad times, which I won't go into? You know how bad her times were. She's stuck in a castrum with Asahi. Yeah, it makes sense. Grab the power. Get out at least. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess.
Because it's,
I
And
just-
her fight is one of the like
yeah.
best narrative fights
Yeah.
in the
It's great.
whole game. It's so good. And the
Mhm.
voice lines and everything, in darkness blooms the spider lily. Like, it's
Yeah.
so good because all of that is a reflection of her story, right? And it's amazing that, you know, later we see in Endwalker this idea of being the light in the darkness and the
Mhm.
themes that Fanat talks about and all these things. And some will in darkness find great hope and strength, and others in darkness will find misery and despair and death. And she, you know, obviously is somebody who succumbed to that, but found her own way forward in a sense, and even eventually finds a reconciliation before she dies, which I think is lovely. She's such a great character. I think I changed my vote. Yotsu really is the absolute best villain of all of Stormblood. She's so good. There's so much to read into with her.
It's
Just 10 out of 10.
and and I'm going to say a thing that you're not going to like, though. She was there. She was murdered. She came back, right? She could have done anything else she wanted to do. And then she got kind of roped into revenge. Xenos was here. He got murdered. He came back, and he completely shifted what he wanted at that point. Right? It's like, it's not the same. Yotsuyu's story is much more impactful. Yes,
Well,
he did, because once he figured out what the world was, he's like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do then. It
But it was
truly
all for
all
the
doesn't matter.
same
She was
goal.
she was
So
more
was hers.
animated though.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
Xenos was cardboard. Like even
So shall we
in
talk about Fordola really quick?
even in 4.0,
Yeah.
right?
Another
He's like, I'm gonna fight people and I don't care about the crown and whatever. Like, he's pretty static and boring. Like, again though, like, it's cool because he beats us, and I like that we finally find an adversary that we can't beat initially. That's what I love about Xenos. But he was still pretty boring. Meanwhile, with Yutsu, she's very characterized. She's like stepping on people. She has this crazy arc where she's just like, I'ma just love Dongo for a bit. And
It's
like,
two different types of
Yeah, it's the same
mental
story. It's just two different-
instability.
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Because Xenos had a lot of animation at the beginning as well.
You know, it's funny. We often talk about in Stormblood about the duality of Yotsuyu and Fordola. There is definitely a duality there with Xenos and Yotsuyu as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I mean, honestly, for all that I have ranted and railed about Xenos, right? Most of it is just because I think all the stuff is there. Stormblood, I thought, was a phenomenal introduction for him as a villain. I thought his arc, what he represented with the Garlean Empire, I think a lot of things. I thought his juicy butt in Stormblood was really good. I liked all of that. His collection of golf caddy of weapons that he had. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. These imageries and, parallels, him amassing power, him, clinging to this only thing that he knows, him living and having been the product of this brutal empire. I think all of these things are actually really fantastic, and especially given the context of his short stories, right? The difference is, Fordola and Yotsuyu both got a reflection arc where we literally saw them grappling with this, whether or not they were truly redeemed in the end, which is, I think, I love gray area. It's so good, right? But we saw the loss of innocence return to innocence with Yotsuyu. We saw the burden of past regrets with Fordola and, what led her to do what she does, and what eventually breaks down her walls, and some great stuff with her in the role quest as well, in Endwalker. But we never really got that with Xenos. And that's not to say that every character that is a villain has to have some kind of, and now you sympathize with me and look back. Not every character has to, but in the case of Xenos, when we look at how purposefully these other villainous figures were used in Stormblood, it's right there. And they even have it in the supplemental stories that he himself was a victim of the Empire. And like, whether or not you ultimately forgive him, I think is up to you.
Sure.
But oh my gosh, I wish, especially when we finally went to Garlemald, if they were going to keep him around for so long, I genuinely wish he had had that moment of narrative gravitas and reflection in the setting of his homeland or wherever. Because I just didn't get as much as we could have, I think.
The closest we got was a teenager yelled at him, and he was like, "Oh, wait a minute, that's it. That's all we got."
And he didn't even really go, "Wait a minute."
My favorite meme out of Endwalker is that scene where Alice is like, "Hey, Xenos, look at me, bitch."
That's it.
And that's it. I think part of what helped Xenos is coming out of Heaven's Word, right? It's we do a thing in Final Fantasy where we have villains and then we forget about them for a while and go back to other villains and then forget about them for a while and then go back to the other, like, right? We have like 1.0, which was Garlean's bad. Oh, hey, Ascians? And then we get into 2.0 where it's like Garlean's still bad, Ascian's also very bad. And then Heaven's Word, it's like, oh, dragons have also been bad this whole time. Also, oh, remember Ascians.
No, wait, it was us.
But then you get back into Stormblood, and you're like, hey, remember, Garlean's still bad. Here's the character that represents all of that we're kind of bringing this back up to. I mean, since like after the end of Stormblood, Garlemald hasn't felt like a huge threat. Like you have that big kind of like culminating thing at Alamigo, right, where you have like this big battle, and like that's really cool. But then afterwards, Xenos turns into a dragon, he kills himself, we defeat him, and then it's like, oh, Emmett Selk was Solus the whole time, and like maybe there's a little bit of like Garlean bad that transfers over to Emmett Selk, just a smidge into Shadowbringers, but
I feel like it's the opposite.
After that point,
like,
I didn't care
Garlean's
about
bad,
Garlemald.
but it was Ascians the whole time.
Yeah, and so I think part of that, it removes a little bit of that background of caring for Xenos, where it's like, okay, he already didn't want to have anything to really do with Garlemald. Like, he didn't care about the crown or that power. And it's like, now you basically take that entire empire away that he already wasn't really caring about, and you have even less of a character.
Yeah, I needed a couple of those like tension parallel scenes. You know,
Yeah.
like he defeats us a whole bunch in Stormblood, and then he eventually acknowledges us as an equal or even having surpassed him. But then I need like for me to like really latch on to this villain and to like really personally feel that parallel. I need those scenes where we, you know, we're constantly clashing and meeting each other as pseudo equals, and then he's saying something about like, you know, what's the difference between us? We were both made to be weapons, and we get more about his backstory or whatever, you know, like, and
Yeah.
he's like, look at yourself, look at how they use you, only we understand each other. I need that scene, and then I am sold. I am sold. Sign me up. Yes,
The problem
please, and
is
thank you.
that he's a Reaper and a Samurai, not a Dark Knight.
The problem for me is
That's the Dark Knight quest
didn't-
right there.
Yeah, I didn't need him to say it. That's because he would never say it. He doesn't want anyone else's approval. Either you figure it out or not, doesn't really matter to him. And I like that.
You know what I do
Okay.
need us to say?
What's that?
What our favorite zone is.
Ooh. Is there even really a question on this?
So, I
Because I
mean,
feel like it's
well,
so
here's
obvious to me.
here's the thing. I think
Yeah.
in a sense, I don't know if Kugane counts, right? Because it's a because like it's a
can
hub.
count
It's
it.
a
You can
city.
count it.
It's a city zone. Like you're
It's
always
count-
gonna
it
love the new
it
city
counts.
zone in an
It counts.
expansion,
It
right?
counts.
What's I mean, okay, well, all right. This is gonna be easy then. Rook's favorite zone, she already said was Kugane.
Well,
She talked
it's-
about
it's
how
gonna
would,
change.
right.
I wouldn't count. Okay, I'm a little different in that I wouldn't count it as a zone. I would count it as a city. Personally, you
yeah,
can say
yeah,
it.
that's
you can
kind of
say
where
it,
I'm thinking. Yeah.
But my favorite zone is the Azim Steppe, hands
Okay.
down.
I think I like Azim Steppe. It was interesting because it was the you know, they always advertise it's like the first open field zone of its kind, and I'm thinking like we had Korthus in 1.0. That was kind of I miss 1.0 Korthus. I wanted them to bring that back. Give us a whole expansion that's just 1.0 Korthus. I think for me it was Ruby Sea, and I think right after we had that whole thing about swimming, I did like some of that stuff. You know, going down to Suinasato for the first time, like that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go into least favorite, but let's get everybody else done here with the positive one.
Yeah, I mean it's either Azim Step or it's what is, and I've already forgotten the name, even though we go there so often.
You loved it
Where
so
Denma
much.
Castle is. Is it the
Yangsha.
Ginshui chain?
Yangsha.
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 Yeah.
I always call it the Ginshui chain or something like that because it's part of it. But yeah, Yangsha I really
Mhm.
enjoyed because it was another like, look what we can do. Azim Step was super huge, but also Yangsha was ginormous. And there were so many different biomes, and like then there's the castle and
Yangsha
the
was-
big
was
event at the castle.
Cool with both the castle, but then also that kind
Yeah.
of like wall thing that it
Mhm.
had. Like it was that kind of like, hey, remember this is a fantasy game. Like what's
Yeah.
that? Like I
Yangsha,
always thought
yeah.
that was a cool aesthetic.
Yangsha's
Yeah.
my favorite.
Gotcha.
There's so many just beautiful architectural and natural things there. The prism springs are cool. That one, like, it's like a tiny grove on top of a mountain full of like plum blossom trees. It's
Yes!
beautiful.
Yeah.
But
pretty.
then also amongst all of that beauty, you see it's a war zone. I think more than any other zone, you see, this is a wartime story in Yangsha.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
That was
Okay.
my favorite zone.
Now,
I would agree with that.
on 3, least favorite zone.
Wait, hold on. I want to really
I'll
fast
give
something
you.
about
Yeah,
the.
start thinking
No, I
about
wanted
it.
to say
Go
something
ahead.
really fast about the Azim Step because the things I really loved about the Azim Step were one, that I cannot think of another game where we have seen a like fantasy inspired zone based off of Mongolia. And I just
Sure.
absolutely loved that. I thought it was gorgeous. It led me to research and learn a lot of things about Mongolian culture that I never knew before. I really, really enjoyed the way that they did their own kind of fantasy thing with it. I think the skybox in that zone at night with the stars over it, it is so stunning flying over it. And one of the memories that I have the most distinctly of playing through Stormblood for the very first time was in that zone. When you first come into the little village, and you learn this amazing thing about like the culture and the people that are there and the unique tribe that kind of runs this neutral ground and trading post. And then you're tasked to go meet this figure, this enigmatic figure that's going to help you. And you go up and around the side of that hill, and they
Yeah.
perfectly timed it so that the music that's down in the village shifts, so that as you come up around the hill, you like cross over the threshold and you see Hien outlined. At least for me, it was like the time of day when the sun was rising. So like the sky was orange and you see Hien's silhouette, and then you hear da 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 da. And I like almost teared up. It was so like one of the most cinematic moments I've had in this game that was not strictly a cutscene. And I just thought it was so gorgeously done. And the whole thing with like, even learning about their culture through the dungeon that's in that zone, getting the Yole mount, having that significant bird, like becoming a friend to one of the tribes, competing in the Nadam?
The Dom, I
that's
think.
right.
Nadam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought all of that was a phenomenal way to tell a story, not only of a zone, not only of the main story quest, but of a people, of a culture, of a region. And I just like, it's still to me like is one of my favorite zones that I think I've played in the game.
I like the weird cave of the coin of something.
Oh, House of Coin? Is that
Oh
that?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. And then they come
That's-
back to it later.
Like when we first see it, they're like, "This is something related to our religion. Probably don't know what could it be." And I love mysteries, just like big
that's one of
obvious
those
mysteries they
cool-
put there, and they're like,
Yeah.
"You're gonna see this later. Don't worry."
That's one of those cool things where as you're exploring, you just find it, you're like, what is that? And then you come
Yes.
back, you're like, yes, finally, tell me what this is.
Yes. But
I've
that is
been
a very
wondering.
beautiful zone.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we doing the thing?
Okay.
Everybody
So
at the same time. You want to
think-
do everybody at
think
the same time?
Yeah. I'm curious if we all have the same one in our head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Think about it. Least favorite zone.
Sure.
We're good. All right. 1,
Here we go.
2, 3. The locks.
The
Peaks.
Lost.
The locks. I'll let me go. Yeah.
Really, I love the locks. It's the peaks for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Lux has some really neat, I almost said cute, neat, interesting details like hidden.
Yeah.
True.
I wish
Yeah.
that they had made it matter. That's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I love the zone. I just want to
I
make
just
it
feel like
matter.
of the two,
Yeah.
the peaks is, although
There's
there
less.
are some very cool like Alamegan ritual sites in the peaks
Yeah,
too. That
ritual
are
sites.
very
Are.
useful.
There's
And
the
you have the Ananta, and there's the whole bridge and the reconstruction
And the Ark.
the Ark. I love the Ark.
The
Yes,
Ark,
that
yep.
ties into it's part of Charlian
yeah.
history.
Is
Yeah,
the shit, what's it called? The upside down hourglass pyramid. Which zone is
That's
that?
peaks.
Fringes or
That's-
peaks?
Peaks.
I think it's
See, the thing
Yes.
about the fringes and the peaks is I can't tell them apart.
I get them mixed up
immediately.
all the time.
that's also true.
Yeah.
That's also
Yeah.
true.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do actually. I think you bring up a great point. Those two zones to me
Yeah.
feel like iterations of the exact same thought, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So
Mhm.
to me, it's like I think we honestly could have had a very drastically different zone, and it probably would have been more distinctive, more memorable. One of my few problems with Stormblood in particular was that 14 has a phenomenal idea of creating fantasy worlds. And we've seen more and more. I think some of it is the limitations of graphics and other things, right? But one of the things that I just disliked the most about all three, the locks, the peaks, the fringes, is the fact that they were like, okay, it's like a desert. So they just went, like brown, and we'll
Brown.
just make all of it brown.
Mhm.
And then there'll be some parts of it that have some like really cool, really beautiful, really interesting little places, because there are, and they're gorgeous.
Mhm.
But like all of it is going to kind of blend together, because it's just going to
Yep.
be like brown
Yeah.
sand and like brown rock and the exact same sand color and the exact same. And I'm like, deserts, you can do so much.
Well,
with
and then
that.
they gave us the locks, which was like a slightly lighter brown with some salt.
Yeah, I found the locks personally be the most disappointing.
Oh,
Because,
you know.
Mm.
The Anata are actually in the fringes.
oh,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
Yeah, they're across the river.
like we said, it's
Uh,
hard to tell them apart.
yeah. I even found, okay, the Peaks is the one that has the is it the M tribe? One of the
No,
cat.
that's-
One of the
That's
that's
fringes.
fringes.
That's fringes.
That's fringes. Oh,
The,
'cause I found their encampment to be really underwhelming as well.
Mm.
But
The ziggurat, which is the thing I
Ziggurat.
was talking about, that is actually in the Peaks.
Mhm.
Okay.
I pulled up the maps on gamerscape.com.
yeah, I think I found the locks to be the most underwhelming to me, because it felt like, because they didn't want to mire it too specifically to one time, that they just didn't do anything with it. And so, like, although there are the kind of ominous red glowing lights, I got no sense that this was like an actively occupied zone that had an oppressive military force. I
Mhm.
got no sense. I don't know. To me,
I'll
it felt like
say,
a map that could have used two states.
who's in charge of that?
I mean, yeah.
Xenos, who does
Yeah.
not give a fuck.
I mean, but still, like,
I get what you're saying. I
You
get
know
what
what I
you're
mean?
saying.
like Xenos is in charge of a lot of things, sure, but there's also like so many other levels of governance within Garlemald, and like rank and status and hierarchy, that like, and other native people that live there that we know are being actively oppressed. Like, if there was no active oppression happening, why would the Garleans even still be, or why would the Alamegans even still be there? You know, like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they just
I-
overthrow
There's
and
so many.
leave?
There's so many
Like,
cool things in the locks, though. There's a bunch of like cave systems.
are some
There's that one that's
cool-
like. There's that one that's like.
There's
it
like
has
a-
both ghosts and monsters.
There's a
cave
there's a straight
thing.
up crypt and a
Yeah,
graveyard
yeah.
in the locks.
I
There's
like
that
that.
cave full of crystals. I really like the lakes where you can swim down and
The
you can see all those
underwater-
ruins.
yeah, the underwater
And
ruins in the locks are the
bridge,
best.
like bridge stairs up to the castle itself. Those are gorgeous.
Yeah.
yes, all of that
It-
I do really like.
The locks, I feel like, work great as a area for them to do cutscenes in. But like when you get to it, I think a lot of, it's as you're going through the story, you're like, all right, and here we are, we're at the locks, and there's Alamigo, and it's like, this is it. And it's like, this is the most boring final zone that 14 has ever had. It's like,
I was
okay, it's
thinking-
just there, and it still looks like the peaks and the fringes before it. It doesn't really stand out. And then like we have like the Alamigan Quarter, which is, it's like, it's kind of outside, but there's not really a lot going on, and it's also just looks like more sand, but in more square shapes. The idea of like coming in like from that 1.0 perspective, right? It's like, oh, we're going like Heavensward, cool, we're going to Ishgard, Stormblood, we're gonna finally see Alamigo. It's a dungeon.
You know what I
It was the
thinking the other day when we
biggest
were talking
letdown
about,
of Stormblood was that whole
Troya.
end thing.
when
Mhm.
we can go back through Troya and all
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like sliver of the void. That is what they should have done for Alamigo.
Troya has
That is-
infinitely
Yeah.
more personality than the locks and Alamigo's dungeon combined.
Well, that's what they should have done. Like maybe we never get to go back
Yeah.
there, but you get to go back and you get to
Literally,
get to go there at all, hang
anything
around, look at the
more.
details. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
such a letdown, especially after coming off of Heavensward, where we had Az's Law as like the final area, and then it's just like, yeah, here's like this kind of deserty place. There's like a castle, but you don't go into it. It's actually the town, but it's just like a dungeon. Oh, all right.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Alamigo. I hope at some point, maybe someday, we do get like
Mhm.
restoration of Alamigo, and they slap some nice colorful tiles on the walls, and they give it its own distinctive looking thing. And
yeah.
it seems like they used to have curated gardens and stuff like that. If you look at some of the like water bastions and like what appears to be like open, planting areas, and
Yeah.
I would love to see some of that, like this verdant, almost oasis, this something that just makes it visually distinctive from like Ul'dah
yeah,
and from
I think
something.
ultimately what hurt Alamigo was Kugane. The idea to have that expansion kind of split right with the settings, because we had Ralger's Reach was it's like the little Alamegan hub, but then we had Kugane, so there was no way we were ever going to get an entirely other like different city. It wasn't going to happen. Which I get it from like that part of it, but it's like kind of a bummer.
There is a way in which it could have happened if they decided to do something that 14 has not yet done yet. And many other MMOs haven't. But we have a few MMOs that have, Guild Wars 2 most notoriously recently, with them having an entire map zone that was a city. And like, in the actual city, there are all these different points of interest and people in different like states on the map, because they have these big meta events, right? Where like there's a big rising action kind of thing that you participate in, or, different fates that would, bulk this out or even pop up or tell the story of various things or Garlean skirmishes or whatever was happening in the city. I think they could have done it. I feel like they kind of went half and half. They went halfsies on it. And because of maybe some of the lack of focus overall with, again, the, telling the story of just one part of the world, I think we saw, for me, it felt like it stood out the most in Alamigo, which was kind of unfortunate. But, I mean, there were a lot of other real highlights to the zone designs in Stormblood overall. But that one in particular, did not feel like a final zone to me.
A small thought. Perhaps not a real actual thing that happened. But in listening to you say you wish that there were more like colorful tiles and the gardens were filled out and stuff, maybe they thought of the lack of beautification or whatever as dilapidation of the city, things that weren't taken care of, more signs that they had been occupied.
Well, they also,
but it didn't really come across that way.
I mean, I still
think we should
remember...
move on to the next point.
Yeah, one last bit. I mean, I do remember, FanFest, like, yeah, we're going to Alamigo, and it's cool because you're going to see, like, Alamegan architecture mixed with, like, Garlean architecture, and it's like, there were a couple, like, security gates in the dungeon. Like, it wasn't what we were expecting, and it was kind of a, from this MMO that had done so many great things. I think for me, it was the first time I felt, like, really kind of like, oh, that's all right. The bar has been lowered.
This is also maybe one very small detail, but I think it's a big detail for certain people in the community. I recently saw something even talking about Lisa's garments and how they're supposed to be like traditional Alamegan garments, right? And then talking as well about some of the real life cultures and garments that those draw upon, and how I think in particular across the world, this is not specific to Japan, but particularly in JRPGs, there is a real sense of, particularly with these kind of like dancer classes or stuff like that, this like harem look or this exoticization of certain types of traditional garments. And I saw a really interesting thread about this recently, especially in regards to Alamigo, where they were comparing like traditional garments where you can see like bits and pieces of how they look, but like the overall coverage of skin is much more complete in many of these more traditional garments, as opposed to like the belly shirts and everything like that. And my own thought on this is that like there is a line and place and time where like fantasy will transcend and start its own tropes and different things will happen and different visuals. And I think you can push that in many regards. But I will say one thing, after having seen how well they can do, like Thavnair, which draws so heavily upon a mix of different inspirations, but largely India, right, and various regions of India, I do think that Alamigo felt like one spot as well in the game where they're oftentimes very thorough and very like fantastic research and diversity of culture. I mean, this is also the expansion where we got the Azim Steppe and this beautiful, like this great, interesting fantasy interpretation of, Mongolia. And Alamigo feels very weirdly ambiguous in many ways.
It's true.
In a way that, like, I think is not a full credit to the team and what they are usually capable of when it comes to, like, really finely crafting a distinctive architecture, culture, style. It doesn't have to be a perfect mirror of anything in our real world. But when I look at some of the things that, like, could be used as inspiration sources for Alamigo, and then I look at kind of some of the just sort of more generic, ambiguous stuff that maybe we have gotten, I'm like, I think you could have honed in more here.
Yeah.
You could have done a little more on this.
I think, yeah, they had the split. I think they felt right, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. They probably had Alamigo because they felt like they had to, narratively, from what players had been exposed to previously. And I think, resource-wise, they're like, well, we're going to do the Far East. And, like, Kugane is a beautiful hub. And I think just, looking at the resources and stuff, at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, we'll put more of it into the Far East than we will into, fringes and peaks and and locks. And I think it shows, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway, I mean, we've talked about that before. We could talk about it more.
Yes. Let's continue on.
One of the other things that they did with Stormblood, this is when they started to introduce guest creators. So we had Yasumi Matsuno came in. They're like, we're gonna make an Evil East raid series, and it's like, sweet. And we joked earlier about hard raids. Yeah, Evil East. Those are the ones. Definitely the more challenging group content that we had seen in the game.
Are you okay?
I'm not okay.
But then we also yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, this is where, and I mean, I think it was kind of a little bit with Void Ark and the like. I mean, I remember people complaining about Diablos, right? That fight, people having trouble on that. But like this 24-man series is when we really felt, and I think it's because Stormblood kind of expanded that difference in damage and utility.
They played with the jobs and the numbers, and
and then all of a sudden, you better be paying attention, and a lot of people just don't because you never had to before. So yeah, 24-mans is where we run into the issue, which sucks because I love Evil East, but when I think about those 24-mans, I'm like, no, I don't want to do those.
Yeah.
I actually I didn't mind that about 24-mans because something I always really loved about 11 is when it looked like you were just going to eat shit. You were all dead. You're screwed. One person could pull the group back up just like, no, we're living. And I got that same amazing experience of, wow, I thought we were screwed and we lived. It was so good experience a lot during these 24-mans.
As the summoner or red mage in the party? No. Because usually that was because you had to raise people back to back to back and get done. And then you'd be like, great. 0 comms. Nobody even noticed it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a whole different feeling.
I noticed it.
You noticed it in your heart.
And that's cool.
I take the
that's
time.
Not why we play an MMO.
Yeah, I take the time to look and see who raised me.
Yeah.
Who raised me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I find a personal sense of pride in that. Of course, it does feel a little bit frustrating when nobody does ever, and you're like, I literally saved us 5 times this run. I full party res.
You're welcome.
Not only our party, but everybody else. But go ahead. I'll do it.
It's just in that situation, you're here to do your damage job, and the raise is supposed to be the extra. But in 24-mans like this, your job is raising, and your damage is extra, and that's just less fun.
That's true. As a healer, I guess it's a little different for me because while it takes me away from certain things like optimizing my personal DPS, right? At the same time, it's like, this is why I chose to be a healer. I shall keep you from the brink of death. I will raise you with the power of my like I love that. It's a great fantasy in my head that I look to fulfill.
To me, I'm the cook at Waffle House outside at 4 a.m. in the morning, smoking a cigarette going, you again? All right, fine. That's me.
That's good energy. I love that. It's very specific, but very illustrative. The Evil East raids, I was personally really excited about because 12 was one of my favorite Final Fantasies. It still is. 8 and 12, 2 of the ones that most people, I think, hated for the longest time. But I loved them both. There's something so distinctive about the creator's style in both the Tactics verse and also 12. I love it. And I was really excited to see that kind of, I don't know, steampunk high fantasy. It's really hard for me to describe old-timey vintage, but like there's just this like really specific style to it that then is like rounded out with all of the political drama of the Tudors, and it's just so dense, and I love that. So I was very excited to see this collaboration, and I do think that ultimately it enhanced our world in 14, it opened up
Absolutely.
this
Oh yeah,
whole
for
other
sure.
region
Yeah, I mean,
and these different races, and I
it
loved
was
it.
it was not the start of it, right? But it was definitely, I think, Stormblood really pushed that idea of theme park MMO, because we had, not only did we have Return to Ivalice, direct, like, worked on by Matsuno-san, with character creation done by Kaita Amamiya, who did the design work on Garo, which is why we got the Garo collaboration. But we also had the 8-man with Omega, where they're like, let's just fan service the shit out of this raid series. We'll bring in Kefka and X-Death. It'll be great. And it's just, they really they went hard for like the raid series in Stormblood. And I think the way that they wove Ivalice, because we knew that like Dalmasca and stuff was in 14 for years at this point, but to finally come in and talk about Ivalice and kind of weave that in, it felt really natural, and it was really cool to kind of see some of that.
There was a lot of like Final Fantasy fan service throwback in Stormblood.
Yeah.
But I felt like the way that they integrated it, I wasn't even fully sold on the actual 8-man raids.
Yeah.
And I never want to prog that stupid Midgardstormer hot tail fight ever again. Even though I love dragons, that fight made me furious on a level that I can like hardly even equate, because it was one of the few times in this game that I can think of where I truly felt like there were moments that were just unfair. There were moments that it was a tick. It was a stupid thing, like, as opposed to, hey, I might be saying this wasn't my fault, but we all know it was my fault. There were moments in that fight that I felt like, this is no one's fault except for yours, Square. Like, and I'm sure that, I don't know, I was a bit earlier in my end game experience at that point. Stormblood was the first. It was the first time that I was really diligently endgame raiding with everybody and progging at the time that everybody was, right? So I'm sure that weighed into it, but that fight made me so mad. But many of the other fights were very fun and very distinctive. And the way that they brought together the Omega quest line in the end sold me so thoroughly.
Yeah.
And they have since expanded on it in such a way that, again, is phenomenal. And I think that's the big difference for the collaboration element in Stormblood for me, as opposed to what it was, where I really didn't feel like it worked as well in Shadowbringers. I really thought that it worked well, and it enhanced our world in many ways in Stormblood.
Yeah. I was going to be really good and try not to talk about the guest creators for Shadowbringers. That's a whole other episode.
Yeah.
One of the other different things that they did with Stormblood was add Eureka. It was an idea. It was something a little different. It was big group zone content with fates and NMs and
we broke
relic grinding.
Yeah, we did.
And puns. That's all I remember about Eureka is the bear puns.
Bear puns. Yeah.
Bear puns. Yeah.
The
bear puns. The content. Yeah.
We're still not entirely sure how they wanted us to do this content. I think initially we were like, this is like 11 compartmentalized and put into 14, but then everyone was like, no, we're just gonna do Fate Train, screw that.
It's so interesting because I remember like the way that they talked about it. They're like, yeah, like people like talked about like wanting to like camp NMs and like basically have like 11 type content, and everyone's like, oh cool, and then we realized maybe this isn't as fun as we remember. Eureka was, I mean,
don't
and again,
know why anybody would remember it as being
a lot of stuff in Stormblood, right? You talk about like the difficulty of the Shinryu fight. I mean, like Eureka was it was interesting because you had, I guess technically, I mean, well, ultimately, like you have BA, right? So you have the Baldessian Arsenal.
Yeah.
So it was like hardcore endgame content, but like it was, you had to take an entire zone of people and coordinate that ultimately, right, to do the fate trains and stuff. And it wasn't easy. And I mean, especially like I remember at FanFest, they had one of the like events was basically racing from the base camp in Pagos to like one of the first like Aetherytes. Like, all right, see who can get there first. Because it was hard because you couldn't fly in these zones. Like you had to avoid aggro, and it was rough.
There's different types of aggro.
Yeah, and then
like in 11.
And then you had the damn elemental wheel thing, and it's just like there was the Eureka actions. Like there was so much in this system.
I have some thoughts
Mhm.
about Eureka, which is that I think even given more time with it, which I never thought would be the case, there were points like, oh gosh, what was the one that everybody quit on? Was it the second one?
Hagos. Yeah, the second
Yeah.
one was
Yeah, second one.
brutal.
The snow one.
Yeah.
When I was going through that at the time, I would not have had this opinion. But now, with more time, having recently gone back to complete a relic weapon, having started to try and gear up thinking about Baldesion Arsenal, having thought back on some of my very first like impressions of Eureka when we were first stepping into it, I actually love this content. I'm sorry, I'll say it again. I love this content. I think there were serious critiques that were. I love Eureka.
I didn't
I love it.
despise it completely.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you were being sarcastic or if you were just like ashamed to say it.
I'm ashamed.
Okay, all right, okay.
Because I think there's a lot of people that will be like, Rook, what in the what?
Yeah.
And then I think there's a group of people that will be like, yes, at last, we knew it the whole time.
One of us.
Mhm.
But I actually love Eureka. I think its biggest problems were its balancing, which was terrible. I think they did need to they need to cut down so much. They needed to make it so much easier to get to various parts of it, as in like experience thresholds. The whole Boja iterated on the whole lost action system and everything in such a better way. All of this stuff in Eureka where you're trying to figure out what in the what do I have to put together just to unlock this stupid ability.
Remember
it is
the
the
way that
most
the-
confusing.
Remember the
But
way the
I wanna
portals
say-
worked?
I know. Okay, the portal thing in the end with
Oh,
the
sure.
You have to
Stupid.
get this one
Stupid.
item and then this other rare item. I only ever saw like one of them actually
Well,
drop.
the rare items are actually pretty cool and they generate revenue, and I've seen them drop pretty frequently even since
Okay.
I've been in there. But it was more so the thing that like groups that were trying to do it could have the entire run get completely ruined by okay,
Yeah.
so
Bad portal.
there were a lot of things that needed to be sorted out. This was not a perfect piece of content by any means, but with some of those adjustments, seeing how a whole portion of the community has still hung in there and loves this, and to this day, actively every week runs Baldesion for players who are getting into it. The first like week that this content released, I had some of the most open world fun in this game that I have ever had. I went with, my partner who was in 11, but I never did 11, so I didn't have this nostalgia. We went around the maps in little groups, spreading knowledge, like, you have to walk by this one. You're bleeding, I'm gonna heal you. Hold on, that one's undead. And like, as we were going around and we were farming these little groups, a new notorious monster would pop up. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what the reward was. Everybody was so excited. We'd rush over to try and see. We might die on the way. It was so much fun. I still have this distinctive memory that I think I've talked about on this podcast before of the first time that it was like one of the northern bosses that is this like giant cyclops. And
Oh god,
everybody in the entire zone ran to fight this guy. And this was the first time I think any of us had seen him pop. It was so exciting. We got up there. Yeah, I was standing like just behind, and I saw for the first time ever in this game, like 100 people die in 1 second. And it was one of the only times in the entire game that I have genuinely felt like a battle medic in a war zone. Myself and the other like I think it was one other healer and a red mage that somehow had escaped this. And we're like, there's one person, like a tank that has the aggro, and we are like looking at each other and we're like, split up. You go west, I'm going middle, you go east. And like, we were literally just walking through piles of corpses and rezzing anyone we could possibly res.
Yeah.
And all of that, I genuinely think was a massive success. And I even think the culmination was phenomenal content. Baldesion Arsenal is so cool. And the fact that they tied it into Baldesion, which was a massive enigma in this game that had been mentioned in passing here or there,
Yeah.
that has become such a big thing. I love all of that about Eureka. Did it need some serious fine tuning? Did it need some serious troubleshooting? Yes, 110%. But I actually thought there were a lot more successes out of it than failures. And given more time, I thought I would look more unkindly upon it. But having gone back into it again recently, I think I actually fell more in love with it and was kind of impressed, especially given a lot of the balancing changes and things that they've done. So I hope they don't completely scrap it, to be honest, because I think they did iterate well in Boja, although there were critiques from Boja as well. But I think we have a need in 14 for this kind of large scale immersive map content.
I agree.
No, hold on. I gotta get this out. Rook, the next time you say that you like Eureka, I want you to say it proudly.
From your chest.
I also liked Eureka. I didn't have a problem with the difficulty in Pagos. Did I need to sneak by a dragon? Fine. I'll walk in. I want that little bit of difficulty. I'm the asshole in content right now who's like, they made that easier? Why? It's not interesting anymore. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for it. I really am. But I didn't have a problem with the way things were done in Eureka. I absolutely love situations like the one you described where it's like, everyone but a tank and 3 healers instead. Hell yes, we got this. We can do this.
Eureka Mages assemble.
Earlier. Yeah, I talked about it earlier for the 24-mans. I love those situations where it's like, no, we are screwed. No, we could do this. We could do this. I love it.
Yeah, I mean,
I just hate being on the side.
There were definitely, I think one of the worst aspects of Eureka was the treasure bunny things.
Oh, sure.
Remember how you could, and as an 11 player, it's like, whoa, they put the O hat in 14. Hell yeah! What do I need to do? I need to get like a bunch of super rare eyes from bunny rabbits. What? I never saw even one of those eyes from those damn treasure chests. But it was
difficult at the time.
Yeah, it was really hard. But I think, right, difficulty aside, I played a bunch of Eureka because one, it was required for relics, but two, like it was one of those things at that point in the game where you could log in and, you didn't, as a DPS, I didn't want to like have to wait in a queue for 10 plus minutes, right, for a dungeon or something. I could just go into a Eureka zone and chances were probably pretty good that there was a train going already, and I could just log in, do something, and it would help. I think I did like 3-4 relic weapons in Eureka, and it's just something you could just log in and do. And there's other people doing it, and I thought as that kind of content, I thought it was really good. And the same thing applied to the other one, Boja. Yeah, I'm like the thing. Yeah, I think Boja worked really well in that regard too, where you could just jump in and there were people just going around hitting the fates and stuff.
I leveled 2.5 characters all the way through Boja. Not Boja,
Eureka.
And I didn't bother to get a single relic weapon completed. I did get a couple. They weren't useful, and I didn't really like the way they looked at the time. So I didn't really bother with those. I just liked going in and doing the content. I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
And I did that. I did my character, I did my main alt, and I did my RP partner's character like halfway through. To the point where I was like, this really isn't that bad. Just try. Look, you're already halfway done. Come on, let's go.
The throwbacks to 11 were fun. There's like minions and other references. You fight Absolute Virtue and Beholding Arsenal, which is like, oh shit. But it was also fun too, because we talked about this earlier too. Like Red Mage, like that was its place to shine, and so that was the first. Like I dabbled with Summoner and Heaven's Word for a bit. I had gotten into Cap and stuff, but like I played a lot of Red Mage in Eureka, and it was fun because I wasn't doing like the best damage, but like I could hit things, make them hurt, and then I could also like heal up the people that were absolutely 100% going to die. So
Eureka
it was good.
Was like going on a school field trip because you always had a buddy. Always take a buddy with you in case one of you dies.
Yeah.
I just bounced off that content immediately because of the time investment and what happens when the group is not good, right? You could be in there for an hour, 2 hours, and get nothing done. And when I saw that, I went, nope, I do not have the time. Like Stormblood,
Never
I had less
experienced
time
that.
in general. Yeah, I was playing at peak time, only at peak times.
Okay.
And people can definitely tell you that at peak time, that's most when you have the most people, yes, but it's also, I'm gonna say it, when a lot of people don't know what they're doing, right?
Wow,
And
called
so it was
out.
just, I'm just saying, it's just in general. I ask anybody who tries to cap at the end of the week. If you're trying to cap at the end of the week and you're doing experts, you see a difference. And that was just it. At the time, I didn't have the time to go through it. And I really didn't have the desire to raise people. Like
You're
most people
reminding
are like,
me
"This
that
is
I
new."
still need to cap this
Yeah.
week, and I'm just like, oh.
Yeah.
On the
People are
flip
like,
side,
it's new and cool that we get to play Red Mage and Raise. And I'm like, dude, that's what I've been doing. Like, no, I don't want to do that.
That's not different
right.
for me.
Yeah.
You're right. It's fun for the people who don't normally play.
Yeah. One last thing
There
I want
was.
to.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Hold on. There was one thing about Eureka that I wanted to bring up that I am curious about how you all feel about it.
Mm.
So, one of the things that they did try to do during Eureka was the idea of unmarked quests. So,
Mm.
quests that aren't just okay, next one, where exactly is it? Right there, all right. And they've done this in some other little parts, or like I think seasonal event or things like that in 14. But I wanted to ask all of you, do you think there's still a place for unmarked quests in our current MMOs? Or do you think that it's something that is more a frustration than any kind of enhancement to the game experience?
I think it depends what the reward is for the quest. I think MMOs these days, right? I mean, it's very handholdy in terms of here's this quest, here's exactly where you go, and in terms of like amount of time that people have, I think that works really well because not everybody has a lot of time. They get home from work, they have maybe an hour or two before dinner, and that's it, or something. I mean, back in 11, like if we had a patch in 11, it was like, okay, we log in, we're not quite sure who to talk to start the quests, and then like literally like a story quest in 11 would be like, go check out this area. Okay, this area could have multiple levels and some kind of underground cave somewhere. You just had to tab around to find it. It's just a little invisible question mark target that comes up, and that's what you need to talk to. And you had to find that. It was impossible finding this stuff back then. So like to have quests now that holds our hand so much, I'm like, great, this will save me hours for one quest. So to have something that's unmarked, I think it's fine if it's just like kind of something whatever on the side. If it's something that is a little more like important that needs to get done, then I'm like, maybe don't do it that way. But it's also kind of nice in a way where it encourages exploration.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the way that it was done in Eureka, I think that would be fine. Continue to do it that way.
I thought it was okay.
There's a group of people. There's a group of people who love that. There's a group of people who's like, I have to find the thing. You're not going to tell me where it is. Awesome. And those people are there. They go and find it, and they share the information. They want you to talk to each other. They say it in the quests when you first start up. It's like you may need to talk to somebody to figure out where this is.
And
so.
Yeah.
I think that the way it was presented, it was totally fine because you're going to have those people who are like, this is where it is, everybody. They're proud they found it. They had fun finding it, and they're excited to share it.
And from what I can remember, too, it wasn't as bad as 11, where it was just like, go to the Adewa subterrane somewhere. But with like 14, like because the way the maps are laid out, like, maps have like different little regions and stuff. It's like, it's in the blah, 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 blah area. You're like, oh, okay, that's like this little part of the map. I'll just go up there and like 5 minutes later, you'll find it. Like, so that was
Chances are looking at the map, they'll be like, there's a strange little hook here that doesn't necessarily have to be there. I bet it's in there. And it is.
Yeah, unless there's I'm trying to remember in the first Eureka Zone, was there one that was time-based? Or am I just thinking like it was just it was a pain because there were ghosts that were there depending on the time of day. That's what it was. That's what it was.
Yep.
But yeah, like I think the way Eureka did it, I think that's a good like balance between like completely
I want to see it everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, ask people who missed the latest side quest if they want to see actual quests where you don't know where to go. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
right.
that was kind of not, people weren't too complaining about it, which is great because it was right there, and like you should look, and yeah, I get it, it's out of the norm. But imagine that, like, if it just wasn't on the map at all and you just had to talk to someone. Yeah, I could see some people having difficulties, but I like it. We don't need the targeting reticle on the map every single time if it says go to this place.
Yeah.
But
and they unlike Fusion Sight, it's like a question mark if you tab over it. In 14, they're like, here's the sparkle.
Yeah. It's a little more noticeable. It's like in 11, you're just like walking around smashing your target key. You're like, where is one last thing I wanted to touch on in Eureka. This was something new that they did for 14. They let you dictate fairly important parts of the story.
I knew this was coming up.
Yeah, I you can't not talk about this, right? I mean, you essentially get to pick if a character lives or dies. And, I mean, this is, we didn't quite have like lore book 2 out yet. People are like getting really into lore. And then they throw out this thing where it's like, maybe this character dies to some people, maybe doesn't to other people. And it's like, but what the hell is the canon then? Like, what are you doing? Drove me absolutely nuts when they introduced this. What did you, and you couldn't even finish it unless you finished Baldessian Arsenal, which was the huge kicker.
Yeah.
See, I'm the opposite in that I love that they did this. Like, I really personally love it, because for me, one of the things that I tend to find the most restrictive about my own fantasy within the realm of an MMO is that it's very hard for MMO narratives to have any unique divergences, right? So trying to figure out how you do that and you still give players a sense of agency in the story that they are a part of is, I mean, it's difficult. And I don't really think any MMO has nailed it perfectly, somehow, magically, at this point, because there are many problems with this. So I loved that they did this. I was a little more conflicted because Baldessian Arsenal in general, the positioning of it in the narrative, I think is tough because none of us even knew we were going towards something like this. So at the time, many of us didn't have time to even prepare to understand that we would be doing something like this. I think I had bounced off initially in Pagos. And then by the time everybody was doing BA really actively, I was so far behind, I was really disheartened to get caught up. Now, it's still very, very heartening that there are groups actively running it and helping people get to that point, even now, which I've been really surprised by. But I honestly think that I had slightly more problems with not being able to complete the narrative without having done Baldessian Arsenal than I do anything about the choices within that. Because, like, to me, that was a bigger hurdle or stumbling block. And they got around it in Endwalker because we talked to a relative of the character, but not the actual character themselves, right? Yes?
I think so. All right, I was looking things up. Are you talking about the character who can die or not? Is that what you're saying? Is that what we're on right now?
I think so, right? I mean, this is, we're talking about old content here, so I don't think is Ejika the one that you can choose to kill or not? Yeah. And the attendant that's at
is related
to Ejika, but is not Ejika. So
and says that if you pick that path, remarks about his death.
Right.
Thank you for standing by him until the end. This is what I was looking up when you were talking about it, because I knew it was coming up, but I was like, are you talking about it? Can I launch into this or not? Okay. So if you have not gone to Eureka at all, won't talk about it at all. If you stepped into it but haven't finished it, he says he's read about the initial reports. Quite a here to shock what's become of the Isle. Do take care. If you finished it and Ejika is alive, he says, I hope Ejika didn't cause you too much trouble. He's impatient and impetuous, but a good sort at heart. But if he's dead, he says, I read the reports in the Eureka expedition. Ejika's passing grieved me beyond words. Thank you for standing by him till the end. So it does actually affect it.
I really like that about our stories, and that's part of the reason that I like having these choices. Is very similar to like just showing up someplace on the right job at the right time. It's like, oh, I'm a dancer too. We're buddies. I love to have that experience. I love those little extra things. Yeah. Yes, definitely. They're similar but not the same.
Yeah.
I like having the choices. I like making up the story for the kicker and stuff like that. I think it's cool. I know it frustrates some people because Fusion is my friend and I listen to what he has to say.
Well, it just
Wow.
it's fine to be like, we always know, we were talking about the lore books. The lore books say that it's written by someone in fiction, so it might not be the right story, and that's always great. But when you experience it yourself and someone else experiences it a different way, I get that. I don't care.
See,
Like,
here's,
it doesn't bother me. But
yeah, here's what I like though. I like that they have the plan to either change the story or to make it canon one way or the other. And they've implemented a tool recently where they can tell you where the canon is in game with Tataru's thingamabob.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a little
Well, but here's that thing though. Like in terms of like canon, like nothing has addressed Ejiga, right? Like I think that's also one of those things that could be variable depending on what you do. So like even if it's the canon record, it's still whatever your choice is.
Yes, but if
oh, go ahead then.
If it does become significant to the story, though, I think we will be presented with the canon, you know, or they will write the story in such a way that both.
I think that's the way they'd have to do it. I don't think that they can make a canonical choice because of what they did.
I'm finding more that's different. The Aetherburner in Walker, if Ejica's still alive, he sent stuff for you. If he's not, it's researchers from Eureka.
That's nice.
That's interesting.
That's so cool.
Maybe it's just my inner writer that knows all the different paths that they need to work on now that you have a variable of, is this character dead or alive? If dead, blah 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 blah. If alive, you know, it's like those choice trees.
Certainly more work.
Yeah, they've got the team to do it, and it adds more value for replayability, right?
Sure.
And choosing different choices on different characters, even if it's just a tiny bit of flair. I don't mind it at all. I actually love it. I am very curious though if with the recent confirmation that Kryl is going to be playing a pretty large role moving forward, I'm very curious if these Baldassian story beats will have a bigger resonance and or the big lore bombs and things that happened. So, I mean, it might be worth it even for those of you who haven't worked on it. If you get to a point where you just don't have stuff to do, to go in and try.
The story by itself, I felt was kind of clunky and held together with like weird, really long strips of tape, right?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that if Kryl is going to be a centerpiece of the story, then they'll take those pieces of tape and maybe wrap them a little tighter, bring the pieces closer together. It'll flush it out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, last thing here, Stormblood added, and I forgot this was with Stormblood, world travel.
Mm-hmm.
That was a thing that we used to not have back in the day. So now to clarify, you could still be on the data center and get matched up into instances with people on your data center, but actually going over to their world and interacting with them, that was what this did.
Yeah. Which
it was cool. I liked it.
Yeah. It was the first step.
Yeah.
It was pretty huge.
Yeah. No,
especially after they'd like split us up.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, we were much more jammed together. But then the game got more, more popular.
Gosh. Hold on, really fast.
What?
Had I forgotten to put in here was Stormblood when they split the DCs. We got the extra DC.
It was the end of Stormblood because it was at the FanFest where they announced Shadowbringers. I only remember because I remember overhearing like some super salty people like just complaining left and right about it very loudly, like by a chair I was sitting in.
That's when Crystal got added for NA.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had totally forgotten. Sorry, Zen. Keep going. I realized I didn't even mention that, but both that and the world travel was really huge for this era.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, like, because they took these worlds that were all smashed together, and frankly there were a couple that needed to be split and spread us all out. We had a little bit of the ability to get back where we'd lost.
Because I remember that because before the split we ended up running some Stormblood EXs, and then that was it. That was the only time we've ever
do it anymore.
Played together with our normal characters.
That was such a huge thing at the time though, because we didn't have data center travel, which we now have. So again, if they add another one over here to NA or anywhere else, a new data center. It's not going to be the end of the world for players, but this was actually a pretty massive thing in the community because we saw many data centers, as we all know, get labeled with something. Are they the raiding data center? Are they the role-playing data center? What collection are those worlds known for? And as we all actually know, I think as 14 players, there's a little bit of everything everywhere. It's just that some data centers might have more of something or might be more well known for that in regards, which then attracts more people. But this was a really big change in 14. We had this big, split where certain worlds were forced to go one way or the other. And there was a lot of discussion in the community about, people who role played with people on this world or raided with people, in this other regard. And they were trying to figure out, where am I going to go? Like, am I going to, if they're all moving to this, world on this data center, because we had free transfers for a while, then am I going to move here? And many groups were split up. I mean, now people meme on Crystal all the time, but Crystal didn't even exist until Stormblood.
Back in my day.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I remember purposefully never taking, because I had a handful. I had some friends whose like half of their friends list was gone, right? I think I had maybe 10 people on my 200 person friend list, because I'm insane, that were gone. And I made a point to never take them off. So now they're still on they've come back onto my friends list now that they're, we're able to move across centers.
Wild.
I will tell you right now that the first time that I did World Visit at all, and I am not joking, was last week.
Oh.
World Visit or data center travel at all was last week.
Wow. What made you finally
help a friend with Savage?
Yeah.
That's really it. That was the only time I've ever done it. Which, I mean, it makes sense for the way that I play the game. But, like, it was an option now. You know what I mean? Like, that, I wouldn't even have thought about helping. Like, I couldn't have done it. But now it's here, and it's so integral to the experience now, right? Like, not having it before then was, I mean, you just kind of take these facts about MMOs as it'll never change, right? This is the way it is. It'll never change. But that's not true for 14. And that's one of the things that opening really showed us at that time. And now we just expect it, right? It's like, oh yeah, all data centers will eventually be able to do everything together. That's not true in most MMOs. Like, they never open that up.
Or they start that way. You either
Yeah,
have
or
it
they
or you don't, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's how it is.
Yeah.
I think. Are you guys aware that I'm a penny pincher in this game? I used world transfer a bunch just to look at different prices on market.
I've done that a couple of times. It's not a lot, but every so often, like if I'm looking at something that I'll either need like a bunch of, or something that's like new, that's just like the price is like crazy, every so often I will. I mean, more lately, I've just said whatever and bought it because I have all this money that I saved up for a large house that's certainly not going to ever go towards a large house at this point. But it's definitely, it's an option. A lot of people if that are into like treasure maps, that's a good thing to do to fight if you're not gathering your own. If you need to buy extra, go and find the cheapest maps, get the most out of your money.
Recently, being able to swap data centers entirely, the raid gear that came out on Balmung at least was like $1.5 million per piece on the first couple days that it was on the market board, and I jumped over to Aether and it was like $500,000.
Yeah, it's Crystal, I feel as though has a pretty wild range of either inflation or at times you get stuff that's just dirt cheap. Yeah, you'll get stuff that's ridiculously cheap that's not cheap anywhere else, or it will be triple the price it is anywhere else.
Well, it's on Crystal, right? It's not how good is this gear for raiding, it's how good is this gear for RP. And if it just looks really good, the price is gonna go up.
Yeah, exactly. And I won't lie, I actually think that I got back into RP because of stuff like world travel, because I, liked where my characters were on Zalera, and as we all know, it is a pretty big undertaking to try and fully level your characters or get them through all the story or get them to whatever map people might be role-playing on. And of course, now that I am back in a full-on filthy role player in this game, I make alts more than I even know what to do with. I have so many of them. I trip over them. They're just everywhere. But, at the time, almost all of my play was on Zalera. And when World Travel came in with Stormblood and Beyond, it opened up the door so that when I started talking to friends that were on Mateus and Balmung, and they were saying, oh, hey, well, we roleplay, why don't you come over? I could. And I was able to just go over and participate in events or meet people there. And that was, I think, really liberating because then, I just started making characters wherever and I was, doing all kinds of stuff. But if I hadn't been able to do that as freely, I probably wouldn't have jumped back into it because it had been a little while since I role played. And, I didn't know anybody on Zalera that was role playing at the time. So I was just like, whatever. I'll get to it, I guess, if I get to it. But it made it so that I could do that.
Yeah, even beyond roleplay, Charles and I are on Balmung and have been since the beginning, and I am never leaving because I have houses and friends and characters and blah blah blah. But Balmung was closed for forever.
Yeah.
Nobody could join. Even if I had friends who wanted to join the game and play, I couldn't play with them unless it was an accident. We happened to land in the same dungeon, which was terrible. But now I have a bunch of friends, real life friends, who've joined the game and are on the different servers, but I can go and help them and we can play together much more easily. And that's just wonderful. I'm so glad that they introduced that.
Definitely. I think we did
Then
it.
again, Balmung's open now, so whatever, I guess.
It used to
We
be
did. I think
cool
we
and
did it, though.
exclusive back in the day.
Oh, so sorry.
So that is Stormblood.
Yeah.
Stormblood. The Stormblood experience. I mean, if anybody, as always, in chat or on YouTube or in the comments or wherever has any other thoughts of your own time in Stormblood, please feel free to remind us. But Stormblood was an interesting time. It's definitely not my favorite of the expansions.
No.
But even just going over it with all of you, I think there was so much in this expansion that was so pivotal, both for characters, the tone of the future story, the expansion of the world itself as we knew it, different types of experimental content, maybe some balancing things that down the road have led to a less than
There
satisfactory
were a lot of things learned with
situation.
Stormblood.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember one of our big complaints back in Stormblood was like, this is a wartime thing. Make us feel that. Make us understand that shit is going down. And they were like, okay, here's Shadowbringers and here's Endwalker. Give us your tears.
Right.
And we were
I
like,
do see in the
okay.
chat. I do see in the chat mentions of Hien. I mentioned Hien very briefly on the Azim step, but yeah, he hot. He hot. I think we can all agree with that, right? That his beautiful hair and his excellent outfit and his
One day it
chiseled
won't be made of
body.
pixels.
When he first appears and you get the song, I believe it's Cyan from 6.
Yep.
And like as soon as you hear that, I was like, I don't care who he is. He's awesome. Like as soon as you introduce him with that song, I'm like, all right, well, he must be a badass.
He wins.
Like, that's it.
it.
That's it.
game over.
Little Sun.
Yeah, Little Sun, of
Little
course.
Making fun of
Sun.
Little Sun is like one of the best pastimes of this game.
I agree. I feel like Magnai and Sadu are two great gifts from Stormblood. A gift that just keeps on
It's
giving
true.
because they are so fantastic. I love Sadu's entire lore and culture and the fact that like Sadu doesn't even, I guess technically Sadu and gender and the reincarnation cycle, right? It's so interesting with that tribe because Sadu is like, I don't know, I'm down with everything. I've been all sorts of people and I just want to fight now because it's fun.
And just
I
like
love that.
tack Karina on as well, because then they became buds and Mr. Little Sun's over here like, so yeah, like you're my Nama. What is it?
Nama.
My Nama.
Okay. You're my Nama. And she's like, no, I'm gonna hang out with my friend. Bye.
Yeah, I mean, we can all agree that Sadu and Serena they are definitely girlfriends at this point. Like we can definitely,
The one scene where he's like holding out his arms and she just runs right past him.
Yes, it's so good. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. And yeah, Magnai is hilarious and never ceases to be hilarious, and his character is fantastic.
Yes.
All right. We did it. That's Stormblood.
We did it.
All right. If you want, only if you want, you can find me on the internet at Raffledurg, RWFLDRG, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Zen. Where can they find you?
Usually, I'm actually really excited about you changing this setup because normally when we're talking
It's so
about
much better, right?
normally when we're talking about where we're at, I'm doing all these dumb dances and nobody can see them. And now you can see my dumb dances. All right. You can find me on Twitter at Zanudra_A. You could see me make that underscore. On Twitch at Strawberry Pop. Also, I got plus a word _1 the number underscore.
Oh, we gotta add
shot.
that. Yeah, we'll add that.
Yeah. The word. For the D&D podcast that Charles and I do. I think where there's one on Sunday and I DM that one. It might be the final one of this current storyline. Or maybe not. I never know how long everybody's gonna take to decide to do this.
I try and help with that.
Yes, I appreciate it. And then all of that gets sent over to YouTube. +1 chat with no underscores. And I
Plus
updated
the
all of that
word
yesterday.
one, the number shot, the word.
Yep. That's me. I do all those things.
Good job. Good job doing the things.
Mm-hmm.
Aldi, no.
I don't do anything.
Nothing
I'm
at
available
all.
here and only here. That's it. And plus, I'm not going to do the whole thing. But +1 shot. That's it. But there's also a D&D campaign that we do here.
Yes.
And
We forgot to tell them.
huh?
What?
For what?
Next
What did we forget?
Well, so
yes.
we were talking before you popped on. Next week we'll also have all of the short stories.
Fine.
See, I am ready.
Alternatively, we could just do a short story of our own.
It's true. So
All right, chat. Short stories. Do you want us to talk about the short stories that are coming out, or do you want us to do our short
We already
stories?
got hashtag Bring Back First Edition going in
Yeah,
chat.
yeah, we do have it.
I think
The
we're
short
probably
stories aren't going anywhere.
It's true.
We can kick it off again. I'm still saying we got to schedule some bonus time where we can and just start getting these D&D eps out more frequently. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
true.
we'll do it. You ready, Aldino? Next week?
Yes.
Next week, everybody. First edition's
First edition
coming back.
returns.
We're gonna
That's
do
right.
it. We're gonna do the thing.
It's happening.
Just for you.
It's happening.
Ropes.
Yeah. Just like, when we asked, specifically you and Anonymous asked for Gaius back all those years ago, and you got him.
Yeah.
So yeah, people asked for first edition, and then it's gonna happen. So
and it's been a year of them asking for it. So it took a little longer with Gaius, but we'll give you guys, we'll save you a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of blew up. So
yeah, none of us blew up, so we don't really have an excuse.
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract from your presentation.
You're fine.
Is it my turn?
Yes, it's
Rook,
your turn.
It is your turn. Where can people find you on the World Wide Web?
You can find me on Twitch at Rookery. That's ROOKURI. You can also find me on YouTube at Rookery and on Twitter at Rookery_. The very final portions of my Endwalker playthrough, which yes, I did finish way back when.
It only took 9 months.
Only took 9 months, but that's usually because in addition to my weekly streaming schedule, the 2 podcasts that I do, I also try to release 1, sometimes 2 videos a week on YouTube. So it's a little bit of a slower pace, but you have plenty of time to catch up. We are on the very final portions, and Endwalker was a doozy. So there's a lot of stuff. We have also been doing a lot of other special streams and bonus appearances. And we'll have more videos on YouTube as well as giveaways and all kinds of things happening. We just got through Team Aetheryte 6.2 marathon that we were doing. So keep an eye out as always, because there's a lot going on wherever I'm doing it. And I'm always happy to see everybody.
If you want, you can contact just all of us at once.
Everybody.
At the show here. Aetheryte Radio at gamerscape.com. You can throw us an email or you can tweet at us at Aetheryte Radio. And of course, you can find us as Gamerscape on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Discord. That's discord.gg/Gamerscape. We had a Final Fantasy XIV spoilers channel, but it's closed because it's been a couple weeks now. So talk about the things, I guess. We also have an Aetheryte Radio channel on there if you want to talk to us about the show. Yeah, that's it. That's all.
Tell us what you think of Xenos.
I think he's a poo-poo head.
Yeah.
And when they named
Not
it,
you, not you, the Watchers.
Not you.
oh, the Watchers. Sorry, I saw an opportunity.
But yeah, let us know about your 10 years. Let us know about or however many years or months or days or seconds you've been in the game. Always happy to hear it. We love hearing everybody's experiences in 14.
Absolutely. All right. And that is going to do it for us for this week. But next week, everybody, we're doing it. We're doing the thing.
happening.
First
We
edition.
just have to remember what D&D is.
It's fine. We got Rook here is ready to go. Gonna do the dwarven character.
There's my
We're
character.
Ready. We're ready. I need to go buy a rope.
Yeah,
It's gonna be great. First edition's coming back. We're gonna do it for realsies this time.
for realsy.
We're not pulling your leg or any other, like your arm or anything. We're for real. We're doing
I'm
it.
glad that you supplied an example.
I just happened to have. I got the box the other day. it was just there.
He's talking about your limbs, son.
Oh,
yeah,
my
I'm
limbs.
just glad you. Yeah, I don't want anybody to like just fill in the the blank there.
So anyway, that's gonna do it for us this week. We'll see you next week for first edition. See you later.
Bye.
Goodbye.